and Development Committee's work session for Tuesday, March 8th, 2022 at 9 a.m. Roll call. Honorable Ricky Nez.
Delegate Rick Nez is present.
Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Honorable Key Allen Begay Jr. Honorable Herman M. Daniels.
Morning, President.
Herman M. Daniels present. Honorable Mark A. Freeland.
Good morning, President.
Mark A. Freeland present. Honorable Wilson C. Stewart Jr.
Present.
Wilson C. Stewart Jr. is present. Chair, you have 4 members available, but you don't need a quorum for this work session. Back to you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We're on invocation, so I'll go ahead and do the invocation. Let's bow our heads and pray. Nihitka Nihigan God. Vanaho Ara Hunlon now Nathan. Echehe Hota Ina the Nihikisle. Unzat and Hios Cartenda. Inna on Hithojon in a Natle. The Fay Hajin, none had he not Taho. Ben not I can eat Hintle. And they had their hot in the seat out a hasic, all an again, lead off and hidden la. In never had it in Spahosen, again laney, at preacher. Also go in now get given a candle. The hot again his Spahosen, Nehenagi. Oh, Nehenabe date, Saho hot, a chindanate lead or cocher. Saho hot has slain. Nza beget a dash to hockey, Nathan Horo, what a hot air on hidden Nenegi. All egg up a nut as a lane. So the hot on Nathan Lenegi ben hit hot air on hidden no horo. Matthew chapter 24 beget a hind G. Naste. Ye got ne, kitchen da bat of no. A hind G. Wars and rumors of wars the nego. And that the nations shall rise against nation, kingdoms against kingdom, and that the netihon nato lestenni, and that the chindanake and the credo lesto not nihiki go holoro tenni. Nenda he not of the nega behind jeans bigeto. Ashore Nahajinapa Naha Ahnzan Kodo Echidika and Lido less, but other Ohidil Ash and the Dash Hashi Tito less, and Dahinit Hino Chana need Ligo Nasi Kato less and Halchan, but Nzad Ilna Nini Hidigan Lane Kodo Inil Kaushate Kodo Hans Sagoshin. And the ideal Carter. The need again his Bahosen. And I yield Zekon his Bahosen. A G. Sehoa Nisho Hunsta. Wanshanetla, 11 Yahudin Nidla, 11 Yahostala. Instantly, then in the Tlegoda. Then not a seal about Siskesla. I don't substant a Horonch, Harlan Ehashitan La Rohan Hidden La. Nihijedon Hinchikation Trahosen Hidigan Laney. Hans Sagoshin Hida Hill Esabe, a hit at last the netai Dakijotla. Escahot Nita, watch either that Ebe Hindale Nestle. Nihits Anja Hundlet on Hanans Es. Nihipahit and Laney Coron, Nzag Vent Nito. What's up in hissing? At the nesto, what's a yego ilnetna? All at all basically the latter ilna, the non and hintin. A sheep and nash innate aero late corona his the ilnego, and I can eat hingo. Trashi tico, Nasi kato less. Shadoyat hige nashin hahunle ashore. Aro hehendi needle litra conven hikachitle aquich. The Shashi Hoda desk as in the yat eho one begin a hard heartly. In here that desk dig on hitching at the halodon here. The had all hot air, but I had your bag on that kind of rego. Kinder has jar the then the wind no harm, so was shin ha, badging up, but I was one long yard eho shin. How was on night or cotton lead or less, so odd. Big A is the halon or less. Ashore, also. Hidden then habit one long. A squirrel shani are a yard and the house consa. The question the hesa. But I had your bag on a rego that is ain't a darrell casco. That's not good at that is ain't a hajla shike yet anzano. Hajla shinda danzan. Hajina but over one le ashore. I wrote that the stash in le while yard in the house habitat at Escargo. In a yard in the east Hannigishin yard a hundred though. The shade up in case be hundred or codo in age at the night at all cotton laid or less. I do ask 20 and have it hundred. Oh, tell us data can the not good. Inzad we get on hidden, not only but so that often hidden in even in a President Joe Biden but so deals and all less. Not only than Lenigin has strong a cargo yard echo. As you, then had at the halon, the Nebison Lego. Ashore, best a hundla. Ashin needn't then away Ukraine holgate between the wind, narrow hands, so goshin. Bay not bandashed in between the wind. But I had your bag on his national kid con. But one le chenda. Ended the con Nihinant I. President Nez, Vice President Lizer, Speaker Damon, Arabish Mahasa Anna Arsko. The JB one let up and sick case we get Kodo, Yat Ehon hidden net, the Arsko job on sick case go. Panahuit Arabai il Indo less. I don't hit a nation is on the hands, so go shin. I don't that the Anshin Hananas land, Nahat Ahaki. A joe it is neat and Sasate. Ashmoren hit Honla. The dart watching a house and hit again laney. Yet out as we get got the seat, ego con. In Jonago Hadot is Cossendal Dossa, city in that I heard in Jonago city, it on Nathan. Gare con Dajan, which in our horses, Jona Goshin con, still Tahajona and the Dutch is a Hanada in shade or lay. And the then Jona goes in the gadgets, the bench asked when he hits this with cut out con, on 8 long, back on 8 son. And I get over but around that kneeling and storage in Anna Rahatlon or less. Njana gonna mal close hadan la hon bene ahosan and late eacheta chestnada hadadan la although yont eren hidigen lane ashore na hajin appa nihides kagon harchin habashwan loroyat ehoshin are in that on e deal mitlana bakan hirchahon in hit one low ashmore again lane. One second you had your body and then you get the Jesus Christ. Amen. And I crochet introduction by whole G stole the con agenda because we class gave the kais to Hogishin corrosion and I not again here said all day. We'll go to RDC first. Honorable Vice Chair Walker.
Yes, Chairman, committee. I don't get staff though, Tyson, I can get Thomas Walker, Edith Schneider. Although Cameron Coal Mine Loop to Lonnie Lake Bird Springs chapters Panashako. Although Western Agency Cahanit. Although RDC Lonnie Lake yet to Hehe Koshananta. Although Dyson Agi question yet if not of Digna. Although so things and Niki Dokinanta Hehe and Sago Nana. Echo Ade King Nihat Avansi Kiss Bedan Hitzi Lakota, which Sohazism. The quid that so now the Zeho. And not Ahojo and Alo A. And CKC Clinic or teacher or a yard of the Shinda, Nasnani Catholic store. So there's an Bikin do bed open nature, which ought to a King not that intended and him son ye check. Or yet our date into the sea clear got 8 session. Got the Arjigo, in his sea kiss of the Zoom or 28 a give the yeah, Benji in his Nanta. Thank you.
Yeah, and Honorable Vice Chair Walker, Honorable Daniels.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Kodo yeah, I don't know kodo sort of then kodo shina kodo sort of them the happy inch neki kodo yeah when cargo. I don't know kodo inch yegi Herman Daniels Jr. I don't know inch then get a bit ani kilachini the sun last see this chini day. So not gen day that's a jet. That's a bizarre. I don't know. I should navigate so I don't know. Two head Lenny, not kind of there. I should say. Without none slack on the old jet, Hoto shot towards a beacon. I don't know if any bananas. What I need to have to thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Daniels. Honorable Phelan.
Chairman, good morning. My name is Mark Freeland. I know the funny Totoni Storo Kiani Shija Sanji Kendra Shiche. I don't send up a face another. Thank you for the prayer, Chairman. I represent 8 chapters out of Eastern Agency, Crown Point, don't know how to excuse I have the Senti, the White Rock, Lake Valley, Herfano, Nayaze. Thank you to everyone. Look forward to the discussion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Freeland. Honorable Stewart.
Oh, good morning, Chairman. Aron the Shaya Vice Chair Walker, Aron the Chennai Kedam Finigi, Aron his one Honegi, Office of Presidents, Aron the Division Directors that Aro raising officials, chapter officials that she is not open that Shaya Wilson, C. Stewart Jr. and Shadow Tell that not shut up, but Hadashagi itself so like a health sheet when it's Illidoni Hijid. Out of 45 agents represent for the Resource Development Committee of the 24th Navajo Nation Council. Aron the twits of the A and Schle, Donan, special Twachini, a precious chain, Twachini that should shade up between the Chanela. Aro Hashan and Hasudins and Bina. Question, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Stewart. Honorable Begay. Honorable Begay. Okay, let's go to staff. Mr. Tahi.
Good morning, chair members of RDC. My name is Rodney Tahi. I'm Kia'ani and Senchikene. I'm originally from Steamboat, Arizona. I am the legislative advisor for Resource and Development Committee. And I wanted to say thank you for that prayer this morning, Chairman. It's something that we really need to hear and to start our day. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mr. Tahi. You're honorable too. Ms. Woody. Ms. Khan.
Oh, here I am. Yat A, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the Resources and Development Committee. Thank you so much for that beautiful prayer. Sago. Needs in. Very good. Thank you. Starts my day off wonderfully. Shay Mariana Khan, Dashijine, Donna and Slinigi a toy here, cleaning Nishle. But Annie Bush's chin, Dash Chit, Dash Chade, Senjikin, Dashinella. Mr. Chair, I will be listening to the conversation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Khan. Ms. Shiako?
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Chairman and members of the Resources and Development Committee. Sheya Melinda Arviso Siako Yanshia. Sitna Jenny Nishlon Kia Ani Bashichin, Twitchini Dashichedo Dashchini Dashanele, Legislative Staff Assistant for the Office of the Speaker here in Winter Rock, Arizona. Ado Hiahat Tidizeni Behaodzi, Dodi Nahat Ado. So thank you very much, and thank you for having us on the call. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Shiako. Ms. Woody?
Mr. Chair, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good morning. Yat Mr. Chair, to RDC members. Good morning. Yat Ben Adon Dan Janon Hatavins and here Shea Teresa Woody and Shero Kapahan Shon the best Jennifer Gianni that she chero to not Jenny that she another hot or a son and Shledon de Hoyet that got steamboat. I did go in a shot hot or in each other to see the late. I don't know. Welcome to our work session. Mr. Chair, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Woody. Dr. Yellowman. Dr. Yellowman. Dr. Shabala. Ms. Jim Martin.
Good morning, Shananta. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, Honorable RDC committee members. This is Sanlatsa Jim Martin, ASC Department Manager with the Division of Community Development. In Schlinigi Ayat Sanabithni in Schle, as Andina Abashichin, as Andina Adashnale do Ashihetashiche. Dr. Yellowman is on the call. We are available today for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jim Martin.
Chair.
Let me go back
Good
to
morning,
Dr.
Chair.
Yellowman.
Oh, yeah. So good morning. Good morning to everybody. And good morning to honorable members of RDC, and to our staff and those who are calling in, to my colleagues as well. Good morning, Shay Pearl, Yellowman and Shea. Aro Shay Sana Bikin Shlendo, Chizasana Bashichin, Tobahanda Shay, Aro Hanagane Dashanella. I am from the Tuba City area, and we are calling in this morning from Winter Rock, the DCD building, and we extend a good month of March to everybody in chapters who are calling in, grazing officials, many of our elected officials who are calling in for this call. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Yellowman. Do we have Davis Filford on the call?
This is Teresita Klashen. I will be filling in for Mr. Filford. Yate Bene, I am from the Office of the President and Vice President. I am an Executive Staff Assistant. I will be listening in today and tomorrow's meeting also. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. This is Rudy Arshabala.
Go ahead, Dr. Shabala.
Yatation and Chairman Ricky Ness. Questions though that it shouldn't us on it should talk in glass or rejoin Nashla. So I apologize. And could I been in the need of the Resource Development Committee that also Taniki out of us Dashiki, Dr. Pearl Yellowman, out of Leo Watchman, the Department of Agriculture, the Kodoshi, Junago, Dahadi class, the Hatchin and that.
Goshila, Dr. Shabala, Mr. Leo Watchman.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Leo Watchman, Daiskin Shla, Tohana, Basichin, Department of Agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watchman. Do we have the Controller's Office on the call? Anybody from Office of Management and Budget as well? Mr. Tahi, could you contact them and ask them to get on the call with RDC? Would appreciate it.
Yes, Chairman. Elizabeth Begay did send her PowerPoint presentation over, which I said did send to which I forward to RDC members. I'll contact her again to make sure that she has the correct number to get on the call.
Thank you, Mr. Tahi. Anybody else on the call that wishes to introduce themselves? I hear none.
Chair?
Yep.
I have
Yes,
two.
go ahead.
I have two here. One, the chapter vice president report defines, and then the raising official or secretary. I'm sorry.
Okay. Go
Hey,
ahead and
yeah.
introduce yourself.
Let me take off my mask first. Grace Tracy, and Chair. I'm the Secretary Treasurer for Fort Defiance chapter. I'll be attending the meeting this morning. Herman Shinana.
Thank you, Ms. Tracy. Go ahead,
Herman Billy, yet Chennai, Chairman for Fort Defiance chapter.
Herman Billy.
Oh.
Okay, Mr. Billy. Yeah, anybody else?
Mr. Chair, this is Mageline Begay from Foresight Chapter. I'm the chapter president. Thank you.
Good morning, Yat Benna. Appreciate you on the call. Anybody else?
Good morning, Yat Bennett. This is Brian Curley Chambers from Navajo Nation Department of Justice.
Good morning, sir. Yat Benna. Thank you for getting on the call. Anybody else? Is Veronica Blockhead on the call?
Good morning again. This is Brian. I'll be covering for Veronica up until 10, and then we'll have another attorney step in and cover the call.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. Okay. Number
welcome.
2. Thanks. Number 2 on the agenda, purpose of the work session this morning with RDC is to have the Division of Natural Resources, Department of Agriculture, Division of Community Development, Idaho Department of Justice, Office of the Controller, Office of Management and Budget, to have a discussion and update on the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund. The Koro Peso, the Red, the Bebanan, Idaho Land Board, the Non-Shidef, Inigi, chapters, the Nahaz Ada. The Peso between Horalia, Korosit Sele, Honorable Stewart, Shad Beta Nahodit Ahe, legislation or Liabe Balance Lane or the has Ani Elia, Dint the Meliajan Shibegaho. The mail so shaint Dint the mail so. a kotiri ki koro ban yatil titan Right, Haki la hasel kitlak and the status haneniki. Aroti diki behas aniki, the resolution is RDCMA 07-21. Aroti diki hanel a chapters di base of the Chanhodalia. Adon data hanel a chapters again, the Lento Asha the better Becca should have not give a chance for Dalia. Anelt a hot a choyos in hot ego a haban yadil kit and you don't hit not on. So before we move forward, I would like to introduce one of my colleagues, our colleagues, Honorable Chairman Henion. Chairman Henio, please introduce yourself. Chairman Henio, press *6 to unmute.
Yeah, good morning, Shalanda. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Good morning, Shalanda. This is Jamie Henio, delegate for Rema, Alamo, and Tojule. I'm just sitting here meeting with District 6, is it? 16, District 16 Land Board. Good to be on this call here. We're all listening into the conversation. Thank you.
Honorable Chairman Henio in Hibeshmahas and Ochendo Adot Honorable Key Allen Begay Jr. Shutsela Nishan. Honorable Begay. None. Number 3, presentations and discussions. A, presentation from the Division of Community Development and Division of Natural Resources on the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund. Ashin Corona Dr. Pearl Yellowman, and then Dr. Shabala, and then Mr. Leo Watchman. So, Dr. Yellowman, you have the floor.
Okay, good morning, Nana, to staff. Good morning, Chair Henio joining the call. I did send a presentation to Mr. Tahi, so RDC members should be getting a copy of that. I'll kind of go through our presentation, and I know the agenda asks for some data and numbers, so I do have some staff on the call. Mr. Lydell Davis and Ms. Jim Martin. Mr. Adekai is unable to join us today, but he has been a critical staff member to this to our AIF team. Him and Ms. Shayla Draper, they've been working with the chapters and providing orientation to the chapters, along with ASC and Mr. Davis and Ms. Tia. They've been collecting data and information from our chapter. So members of RDC, we've dedicated a large team to this implementing this resolution. So I'll go ahead and start. This is RDC MA 07-21. In our presentation, we've outlined some of the requirements. If you recall early on in our early visits with Delegate Wilson Stewart, the sponsor of this legislation, he wanted to ensure that we reached members of the community And so there was a recipient requirement that we wanted to make sure that we incorporated or made sure that we implemented. We also have in our presentation a flow chart, and this flow chart kind of helped the chapters understand some of the communication and collaborative efforts that we had with Division of Natural Resources, Dr. Shabala, and his staff, along with District Grazing Committee officials and Eastern Land Board officials, parallel with ASC and our team that we were working with. Also, the purpose of this flow chart was to make sure that we presented consistent information from DNR and from ASC. So in a way, it really caused us to meet regularly with DNR, caused us to ensure that we're providing consistent information to all chapters, and that if chapters went to DNR or DCD, our goal was to close in the gap on that information. The flow chart further explains some of the priorities were valid grazing permittees. Second priority was valid grazing permittees who may be in violation due to overstocking. So there was an inventory that we relied on. We relied on DNR to help implement. And then priority 3 were livestock owners with no grazing permittees. So we did have to categorize them based on funds available, so that chapter staff and community members understood those categories. There was an implementation process that we had to put together. Again, it's important that we have clear policies with these implementation and funds. In the event that the sponsor or the legislative branch want to implement or utilize these funds again in the future, we now have a path or a policy and program in place. So we spent a lot of time creating the policy and the process, and our end goal is to close out this particular legislation and see that maybe DNR can facilitate the process in the future. So we had to incorporate and coordinate with OMB. Business unit numbers had to be established for 110 chapters. And then data was entered into the WIN system for all 110 chapters. We also had to incorporate ASC. All SPPS staff were involved. So we're thankful to ASC and our 8 SPPS staff. They were the...
Dr. Yilma?
Oh.
I apologize for interrupting you, but our PowerPoint presentation is not opening up. If you would have your staff resend it again, or send it to Mr. Tahi and he'll send it directly to us as well. I see we got it from you, but it's not opening up.
Okay,
So
well,
we're trying
to
follow what you're saying. Thank you.
Okay, we're resending that. We apologize. So I'll rush through this, then you can review it, and then if you have questions, we'll be here to answer some questions. So there was a tremendous amount of coordination between SPPS and the chapters. We had to coordinate communication with the chapters on receiving their chapter resolutions and distribution plans. We had mandatory, or not big on that word, but we had mandatory meetings with chapters and chapter officials on the type of distribution. That distribution plan ties into their procurement. Chapters played a big role in this, so we appreciate all of the chapter officials, grazing officials. They created their resolutions and their procurement plans. And so there was quite a bit of work on the chapter part. So we appreciate that the chapters were engaged and I think they were eager to get the funds. And so we were on a timeline to implement this. There was a special component for Eastern Land Board officials and district grazing officials to participate, or they were integral in this process. So they had some roles and responsibilities as well. We created an application for this. We created an application process. We tried to, with all applications, make it minimal, but there was a lot of information that was needed for this at the chapter level. So you'll see in our presentation, the application, there was a cattle tally count, sheep tally count, goat tally count, swine tally count, chicken tally count. It got extensive. The chapters and the grazing officials and Eastern Land Board, they had to sign off on that. So we had a application process. I'll kind of wrap up here. Once the application process was completed, it was coupled with the chapter resolution template. We provided a template for the chapters. Some chapters had already implemented their own resolution. And then we had a distribution plan. The distribution plan was, as it states in the legislation, needed for OOC to distribute the funds. So that needed to be a part of this plan. We had the recipients identified, the timeline identified, and then the procurement process identified. So lastly, we have I think a summary sheet for the chapters. They were emailing and communicating with DCD, and we created an AIF email so that all of the chapters and the information would go to this particular email. And then we have an FMIS update sheet. So Ms. Jim Martin and Mr. Lydell Davis, they can speak to the monitoring of the funds. So we have, we're monitoring these funds, the number of chapters that have received AIF funds, the number of chapters that are pending these funds, and then the chapters, the remaining chapters that are pending, work closely with the SPPS staff to complete those documents that are needed. And then in short, I did report over the weekend to ASC, or I'm sorry, Eastern Agency, that right now we have 74 chapters that have received their AIF funds. 31 chapters are pending, and those 31 chapters were in communication with ASC and SPPS staff on the type of information that's needed for those 31 chapters that are pending. So we, Chair and members of RDC, that's kind of a summary of our presentation. Hopefully you received the presentation. It's lengthy, it's over 35 pages, but it shows in detail. And I do know there are members of chapters that are listening in. There are still some chapters that have questions. There are chapters that have some distribution concerns. I listened in on a call over the weekend. There was some concerns with NAPI and the overall stock or availability of hay and those procurement items. So we lean on DNR to help resolve or provide updates on some of those concerns for the chapters that are listening in. And if chapters have concerns on what they need, to submit. We have some SPPS staff that are listening in as well. Also, if there's additional information on the funds or the monitoring of the fiscal amounts, Mr. Davis is on the call, Idell Davis, he's our senior accountant, to help answer some questions. So Chair, that's just a quick summary of our presentation, and hopefully members of RDC have received that presentation by now. So I'll go ahead and end there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yellowman. Ado, we'll go to Dr. Shabala.
Good morning, Chairman Ricky Nez, Ado, Vice Chairman Thomas Walker Jr., Mark Freeland, Ligi Itene, Sana Bisley, Dashed Ligi Itene, Ado Yat Wilson Stewart Jr., Shanantai, Oshanala, Key Allen Bigay, Yat Doshafna, Ashram Daniels Jr., Yat Ado Shadeja, Pearl Yellow Man, Yat Ado that is enough funky though. The $4 million deeded the meals of Besson data. Ado and I Wilson Stewart Jr. Yedi Snot of Bellas Lee Holt Ada at Dantes Data Ita Bellatas Lee Ado Bahim Onish. In the dot after Ado Haida betrade the dot after chapters that were certified, Ado that were certified, according to the Heinz Ado Nal Gloshi. Ashit Avaj the Nekesha Biga Iskidi Ebik Asta Abiga Iskidi Nala Bajil Chiho, forget the Jachin, Eba Yashti Igi Lama, Ek at the Nessa Tabali, Ko Edi Darn Date Aniki, Nal Joshi Best Epichia, but Date Aniki Pesa, Edo Badolesta. What are the Banyeta Asti besought the Trajito? I don't the Nal Eto. I don't that Hina Hoche, the Hojona. I see that Michel Tratahaloniki Edo, that Ogo, that Bayeta Asti. I don't see though, I see Edo of the Orient dance, not that no. Elhart that they need a call. I don't stand a thing I shall trapeze nasa Bekashito, the better. A battle I don't need. I don't a quick flash and then I don't stand I don't get that the better not sauce that they sausage. I don't need it. I don't be count and the Dr. Yellowman, Yahat Z count a Benal sauce bed. I had long the bits out that the has only a cunnet, $8. I don't get that Benal sauce that the Niki the Bebenal sauce bed that the Niki $8 believe the Haloniki the meal based on sa. $8 $8 potato nato. A coish isha. Aro Shado Dr. Yellowman, his Ilia actually it has la kahata ita satasi glo. A call a question Tasseza. A call Aro stank at Bahuint o listens ago. The Bebenal sauce that they sausage is the Sadosh Hado need. Around the Bekeo Nagi, Benal sauce the Halonagi, the Bebenal sauce by the Haloni, but it's not that the Hest Loniki, Ena Con at all. Hanahato Niki and card in the the Bebenal sauce by that, then Niki add in the Ebe, the cut by the Hatol Jish. Look at Abigail, you can't call Quaggy Aya. Ayashna King Nepini Nani. The Bebenal sauce that day, Sosiki is all ya ado nede, dink the miliaja, as a honest go in hidden at the Bebenal sauce that day sauce. As get it down the be needs aunt Neholia da 1930s and livestock reduction ben hunt a stay at eat the Bebenal sauce. The melia jitoba stadnes natin konel na ko et nebetras ni ako ita the neni klini deen is not deen no this deen the melia inil na the population of the Navajo Nation in the 1930s was 40,000 ako ita 7,500 livestock permits. Ni chopet hatas ni. Ako kostan hot de shizo kon soko shiche but de sons kon soko shiyaj but de sons da no enle asar de mildo ba na kidneys not dindo ba this din sadly those 75 original livestock permits ended up to be around 1,240 permits from the original livestock permittee dividing their permits into their children or grandchildren or relatives. Ado stetna hote shish, ado saed etahes na nishtha akotish jid at 4,000 livestock permits are active on the Navajo Nation. Ado the mo is lenta engage beta husband Navajo partition na shiketa inigi 1974 the Bebenal sauce it's not hotalia it's not cancel utalia ko etishida that whole region the Bebenal sauce that is sauce ako ebik ako deep base Bebenal sauce that he all lesigite at sakako art in it of a sort cut the dog. I think it's East Johnny decision and a call other tradition just sitting double asa chapters up base of Holia around the cutting over asa 8 up your cast of Holish 8 this G the she daily niche. A call asa go English now dish as deep based on that aneta 110 chapters based on the Tahliya Araba Tzidate case the la shita. The Mobi Yajiata Eastern Agency Council meeting a Tahon Shongo in there Hoto ni chapters based on the Tata test and in API the Aden Ka net a hostage and so there is no hay currently available at Navajo agricultural products industries for the chapters that received this $4 million to purchase hay. So my advice and suggestions was for the chapters to contact the vendors. I, Rudy Shabala, do not know who the vendors are from Southern Arizona that truck hay in to our flea markets every day. And I think I advise the chapters to find out who these vendors are. And so Asia staff, Adana, to find out who these vendors are and also to find out how many semi-truckloads of hay come into the Navajo Nation on a daily or weekly basis. So kwagi aya just asi kahiyaki itzashanan in API but stage. So the chapters lohate des Cortez and Deshido Edo all of the hay we rely on is from NAPI or Southern Arizona. But Southern Arizona not kitki akodik at hay out so I think I would like to add a suggestion at this point, Chairman Ricky Nez. If we can keep these AIF fundings allocated to chapters, keep them, I don't know how to say it, but keep them live throughout the summer. So when hay is produced at the farm level, that the chapters will still have these funds to use to purchase hay for their chapters this coming fall. Ben at edo lefty $4 million. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Dr. Shabala for that. Mr. Watchman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I think most of the items have been covered by both executive directors. The Department of Ag has been assisting since the legislation was passed, working along with various staff members. And at this point, I think the report details on how many chapters have been served, some of the, I guess, the issues that still have to be overcome, as well as looking forward ahead on the possibilities of allocating or reallocating dollars for the same purpose. As we all know that we are going to be experiencing a drought once again, if not already have experienced the non-snow of winter we've had and so forth. Mr. Chair, basically I stand for questions if anything has arise or need answers to what the AIF fund has, or I guess how it's originated, and also some of the projects we have outside of this $4 million. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Watchman, for that. We're done with A, under presentation and discussions. And then, honorable members of RDC, do you have any comments or questions on the updates?
Mr. Chair, this is Daniels.
Honorable Daniels, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I was hoping that other delegates, the 24 council delegates, to get on the line. Because when we were down at Scottsdale, Navajo Nation, Department of Ag, CKP, so from RDC, I was the only one down there. I don't know so even work session. This leadership meeting. I was surprised that some delegates, they don't know what AIF means. That AIF, they didn't know what AIF stands for. I don't know. So I was just hoping that they will get on this call to get more clarification, get educated on this resolution that was that's in place right now by RDC. So I know that I'm not educated. So the ones that got on the line, I really appreciate them for getting on the line. Yes, I agree with Mr. Shabala on the hay yet and nappy they're out of the three twine, three strand. Hey, but big bales again that the Ecuador, but big bales I see you that they either our Navajo ranchers again, especially our elders. Go go. So in the way with Colorado hay producers, I see. I'm sure that the hay, I see I don't know, the price of hay is like $20 a bale. In Colorado, it's like $26 a bale. So when they see that we how they up the price on their hay. The Navajo Nation $4 million. They RDC for $4 million. They allow saying about chapters that are going to be looking for hay and then that price I don't know don't that so okay I but the I don't know some of the chapters they're resorting to these local vendors. They get their hay from Arizona. So they had on somewhere Blythe, Colorado, Blythe, Arizona. I don't see this. I don't know the Mojave Valley down the but I see them. Then I just head that these business owners get hay vendors. You know that and stay yes, Jiggy. I just a bit of the so the auto lesiki. But then the okay, I see the cut. The cocoa can get a stock of the cat can get a dance of the nation that or the harder dodge. Abe Anana Edo Lesico. So in a way looking at the numbers, how many chapters got paid and how many chapters haven't received their AIF aid of Mesh Ego. So I think within Ashida doesn't get aid present an honors metal, but could on a great okay, oh yeah, I see the net shako. So could on a great I don't know if we need to do an amendment to the resolution that we passed to stretch the dollars. The end of the year with us big. So yeah, but nationally we set a deadline on this the funds again. And so 80 of feet or let's put up Mr. Chair, thank you. I don't know I'm gonna be getting off the line. Navajo Youth Commission meeting is starting now. I chair that commission. I'll be getting off the line, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, Honorable Daniels, Kroba Henji Gito, Ben Hilnausen, Laggy. Certainly appreciate it. I don't Mr. Tahi, if you would also maybe Mr. Watchman, if you could have your staff send the call-in number so they can call in and listen to this conversation today, this discussion that we're having, most especially the grazing officials and the land board, if your staff could do that. And also, Mr. Watchman, let your staff know that it is okay to send out the RDC calendar. That way they kind of know which days they are able to call in and just listen in on the Resource and Development Committee. It is very important that these grazing officials receive important information when oversight is having these important discussions. So that I would like to let you know, Mr. Watchman, if you would allow your grazing officials, your staff to contact the grazing officials and land board and make sure that they have this information available today. If they can call in, that would be good. And let your staff know that it's okay also to send them the RDC calendar every month. That's what we used to do previously, but now we'll go back to that, and just want you to know that, Mr. Watchman. Honorable members of RDC. Any other comments or questions?
Chairman.
Honorable Vice Chair Walker, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, committee members, staff, the officers that are on the call with us for this meeting. Presenter of the Department of Agriculture, Division of Natural Resources, and Division of Community Development. Members of the 24th Navajo Nation Council, colleagues that are with us today. He did the AIF a purchase, a distribution project that we're talking about here. I'm interested in knowing what the costs that are associated with it's administering the funding, the resources that it involves. As we all know, except napping, the napping. The next channel is that for Chico, Chinago, there are costs associated with that, especially hay coming from faraway towns and communities, cities. Somebody picks up the cost. If they are vendors that are just transporting hay out here to sell, say like at the flea markets, they pick up the cost and they somehow it's worth doing that business for them. Hay vending. On the CDO chapter, they are looking for hay to purchase from a vendor. Somebody's got to bring it in. Somebody has to pay the cost. If it's the chapter, I'm interested in knowing what costs are involved, the amount would be. So it's just business out there, but to the nation, that hay purchases, the meeting side, so I know chapters keep track of their expenditures and their administrative costs. So where this is concerned, administrative costs, what does that look like? I know it's too early right now, but some chapters still haven't received funding, therefore haven't made purchases, and some have. It's probably too early, but I would think it's worth looking at that information when it becomes available. Takes money to do business. And then for instance, it needs ego. I thought you said the peso chong but it never quite was even yet. Although of course the Navajo Nation isn't doing this to make any kind of money off of this, nor should chapters be doing that, or anyone. Never caught what end there is that cost there. I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that or not. Like I said, it's too early to get that information anyways. And I'm chairman, though, committee members, but I do appreciate the information provided here to the committee. Ado Nasco Nahot, I have to cut these in the to not me hego. I thought Patsanati, Cotation Soto, Pansascation, and I could have the if it to see the Judo did the peso showing me on Jono never kite or what is the band Sahakis or peso and net the battery feed so that's not coming from the AIF administrative cost chapter peso to your Nikita. The call funds Sakishan. I'll give back to you, Chair. I said I think it's premature to probably ask this question, but I think it's a good question. And any of our bonds, that would be appreciated also. Chairman, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Vice Chair Walker. Dr. Yellowman, Dr. Shabala, or Mr. Watchman. Either one of you may respond.
Thank you, Chair. Shadishna Rudy Shabala.
Go ahead, Dr. Shabala.
Yadishan and Ido Yadishan Vice Chairman Thomas Walker Jr. There's Yin Anigi, the hay producer. Ado Chiditsa Yegi. Most of the time, Asati, the business, the truck owner. I call later the truck owner that's it like my yishne edo date that's a hay producer yish contract the yish, you know. Ade the net ye Ado yista off basa. Ein here as kepa he kaho 2 bale, 4 bale, 10 bale that the no that's over zone of the yo yellow Hashin Zahnahal Zish Hoban Nahanne Akoko Tahyo Yes Bobana Hiniko all kill Ado not Tonahas Neo here Shoya Chitsa Ndon Wasi Hashin Zahnahal Zishon that Hantilko Akodi Sanat Leto Face of Hasti Han et Khayla Lavender dan the Khayla Chitut Sapeta Halla. Is connected the Yi Lago. Or she chong in a $3 hay producer in Liniki, Adon the Dutchitut Sap. Behalonigi of the Yegi. Chitut Sap as a zine of the Yo Yellow. Chapter Nagis Neo. Aid up Bible contract Ilya up. I thought could a naked up. I thought up the base ya could it got the hill yet. Could a whole ye the chapter of the needs and couldn't hadi yes. A coin lay he sheet of the dog yes. As I was a chapter at the dawn was not as it made of Basoza chapter and Dad Nishiki as Kate the dog. They have kind of like a escalator now. Kide needs. Aro it like cut the little class kid die car lineage. Aro on the eta chicken. A call Aro art at that nearly 800 on the way. It should so. Not so they don't have to sit there all day and wait for individual Navajos to come in and buy a bale here, a bale, you know, they're done. And they turn right around, they go home, the next chapter, and they'll have business immediately. A coincidence, and Edeban, such case, Vice Chair Thomas Walker, Jr. Yes, could it Shana could it dish so. So Ede about this that's a con has seen I think Bohonet you don't know. Go Ashen Shishna Ashaniki, the Yini Doshta on Danes, under the Navajo Nation, $4 million chapter Katista Adik, Dahadol Gistan, Niniki or Hayi or lay back about hot Sunday, 8 of double Asha peso, Asha $21 a bale, Wahanda. So those Sohodo Beja, those Chohode either. And actually put the inflation, California, the diesel, base of oxygen, 1 gallon. According to she, I know it's over, around $4 a gallon to the gasoline. Quite never pay a car.
Thank you, Dr. Shabala, for that. Dr. Yellowman, would you like to add anything?
No, sir. I think Dr. Shabala covered that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Stewart, you have the floor.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman, Vice Chair Walker, Dr. Yellowman, Dr. Shabala, Mr. Watchman, staff.
Honorable Stewart, we can't hear you.
How about now, Shania? Can you hear me?
It's better now. Go ahead.
Now? Okay. Shania, I have, like I stated earlier, the Fort Defiance grazing official and the Secretary Treasurer listening in, and then also the chapter manager for Fort Defiance. In listening thus far, I had asked the grazing official, because I do attend the District 18 meetings as well with grazing officials, and their only concern is that the chapters themselves, they haven't gotten their fundings yet, but we've been keeping in contact with Dr. Yellowman's staff, the SPPS staff, and we have been having that communication, that dialogue open with them to continue on. But as far as the grazing permittees go, the only area that has been brought to my attention right now at this point is that we do have some grazing permittees out there that do have one permit, and the permit holders are the ones that have the first priority, being that they are in compliance.
Honorable Stewart?
Yes, sir.
I see it faded away again.
I wonder who's my internet. It might be my internet here at the chapter, Chairman. Let me call in on my phone, and I'll try from there.
We can hear you now, pretty clear.
Yeah,
we can hear you clearly now.
Okay, so with that, what I was saying is that there's one permit, there's two names on there. Let's say you have two children. Those two children now have that permit. So each one is asking for the same amount. They share the permit, but they're asking for the same amount. And everything that that's the only concern we're already into on this side.
Honorable Stewart?
Yeah.
Honorable Stewart?
Now?
You may have to call in separately.
Okay. Let me try that. Okay, Chair.
We can hear you good now. Go ahead.
All right, I have to lower my volume on the other laptop. But the question I was saying that we have on this side is that the permit, the grazing permit, it does have on the front part of the permit
it has the two names on there. So each of these individuals, they're asking for the same amount of the permit. They do have, each child does have their own livestock that they care for and whatnot, but they share one permit. That's one area that we're running into. And the other area is that the reason for the permit holders being criteria number one is because, if I'm mistaken, Mr. Watchman can correct me, but they are in compliance with the scope of plan of operation within what was already established within the AIF. And that's why, I wanted us as RDC to go through this today so that we can compare this legislation with what is already passed from councils before. But the thing that I have always stated and I have a problem with is that it's not being distributed back to the ranchers and the farmers. It's staying within the Navajo Nation government. And to me personally, I don't agree with that. Because I have stated before, there was a time that the farmers and ranchers could go to USDA and Gallup and file there, get the funds back from there to do what they want to do with that as far as their livestock goes, and just report back to USDA. They don't see any of it. This is the first attempt that's being made to give it back to the chapters, to the local governance, to say, here, try it. Let's see what it does. Let's see what we do with it at the chapter level. And that was the intent of us, to see what would be done at the chapter level, to get not only the ones that are in compliance, but the ones that have failed to be in compliance, to get them into compliance with what needs to be done. Because we hear it as RDC members, we hear it in our meetings with what we go through, that the drought, the erosion, the forage out there is not enough, the feral horses. But how are we going to assist these grazing officials to take care of the land and to have it regenerate itself? What kind of funds are we going to use? What kind of local action do these farmers and ranchers want to take with the grazing official and the chapters to say, this is our funds, this is how we're going to use it, this is what we want to implement? Because to me, that's the way I would see these funds being used. But this is the first step in that direction. And right now, as far as the question that was raised earlier, I think it was from Shajat or Shanar, Mr. Daniels, if there was a deadline to it. There is no deadline to this this funding that came in, the $4 million. But we're going in, we've completed year one of trying to figure out how we're going to get it out to the chapters, really working closely with Dr. Yellowman and also the SPPSs on that side, and seeing what we can do, what formats can be done. And then also now the chapters have their new format resolution. And so again, in the presentation that Dr. Yellowman gave in step 5, it just says that, for example, that all products will be closed out by June 1st, 2022. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's where some grazing officials get confused. They think there is a deadline by June. So you're having some chapters produce resolutions saying that they want an extension, but there's no extension to this. And that I just confirmed that with Dr. Yellowman as well. There is no deadline to this. But that's something I think we need to talk about. But as far as the additional funds go, that's going to be in the next half of the presentation. Once we get that into our part B of the agenda, Shana Chairman, I want to see where we're at with these AIF fundings as well, and to see what we need to do with it to make sure that our chapters, and we are aware, that hay prices have gone up. Livestock owners, right now, I'm paying $20 to $22 on a bale of hay every week. And, that's because I love my animals. I'm not going to have them out on the range and have them running around and whatnot. I'd rather keep them pinned up and care for them the best way I know how. But that's upon us as livestock owners too, to do that. So those are just some comments tonight, and some of my clarity that I wanted to make. Again, if I'm wrong, or if I missed something, Mr. Watchman, Dr. Yellowman, Dr. Shabala, or staff, you can all correct me. But that's what I wanted to say so far, Shana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Stewart, for your concerns and also your questions here. So let me give the floor back to Dr. Shabala, Dr. Yellowman, or Mr. Watchman. Either one of you may respond.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Chair. I just want to add to Delegate Stewart's question and concerns. That is true that the deadline in the chapter distribution plan template was a sample, but I just want to add that the nation does have a fiscal year in date where the AIF funds may be reverted, because we did run across that this year at the end of the fiscal year. So DCD, our senior accountant, Lydell, he had to resubmit all of the budgets to OMB. So there is a technical side for this, for the funds that happens in our other funding accounts as well. So we do recommend acknowledging in the legislation some type of a deadline that helps us close it out, or in the event that RDC or the sponsor wants to extend the program, we also have some recommendations as to how that extension could be handled, or if we could hand that over to DNR for DNR to begin implementing. We do believe that we put the foundation down for this program to move forward, but DNR could administer it. So there are some recommendations in the event that the sponsor wants to adjust any type of extension or reallocation of future funds. So thank you, delegates.
Thank you, Dr. Yellowman, for your response. And also, I do think that we probably do, Honorable Stewart, since you're the sponsor of this legislation, perhaps find out what we need to do, or what you need to do to get an extension on this resolution for chapters, and most especially the livestock owners out there, are Navajo people that desire to use this money. Unfortunately, there's no hay available at NAPI, so somehow the early cut at NAPI might be feasible. It might be too fresh too, but we can figure those things out, Honorable Stewart. Do you have a follow-up? Honorable Stewart?
Shana, Chair, no, I don't. But we will go ahead, or I will go ahead and look into those, the extensions, and also with the hay distribution plan as well, Shana.
Honorable members of RDC, there's a request for a grazing official to allow them sometimes, perhaps 5 minutes, to allow them to speak to the issue, their concerns, and how they're dealing with this distribution at the local level. So we'll start with many farms. Mr. Roland So, you have 5 minutes. Mr. Roland So.
Honorable Chair, good morning. and members of the committee, for giving us the floor. For some of our chapters, we are collecting applications, and so far for my chapter, we're running about 62 applicants that came in. Some of the things that we're dealing with is what Honorable Stewart, my brother, has brought up. We have several people on each permit, and they all want their own feed to be distributed. Some people have like 6 to 8 people on there on one grazing permit, and they all want an equal amount. Well, actually, each one of them want their own. And the problem with that is we don't have enough supply to do that, since it's a 50-50 and non-permittees are third priority too as well. So when we start doing that, we might come down to 1 bale or 2 bales if we're doing hay. So what I've been telling them is, when this permit was given to you by your parents and you were told to use it evenly and divide things, share in equal amount, is what some of the resolutions say. The same applies with the feed. They're going to have to share that, which brings it down to sometimes if we're going down to a bale, they're going to have to split that up, which is not right. It's not feasible. So I'm telling them per permit. Also, the other thing we're dealing with is, because of the pandemic, we've had a lot of people that didn't get their tallies done. I have grazing officials within my 14 chapters that are reporting that they did not do tallies for certain people because at their gates there's signs that say no visitors. So they had respect for the family, their safety and well-being, so they didn't approach them. They try to contact them in other ways, but you know, if you do tally, you have to have people round up cattle, and they have to be pinned up. You have to do a home visit and usually family there. And throughout the pandemic, we had breakouts in one of our chapters from a roundup. So those are the reasons why a lot of people did not get their tallies done, especially within the last 2 years. So now we're asking for tallies, and some of them don't have that. More than half are falling into the non-compliant section because of this. The other problem we're having is lack of supply, which was brought up. I've been bringing this up ever since then, that this resolution was passed by a Resource and Development Committee. So the hay prices have been climbing, and some of the budget that we obtained, that the quotes that we obtained, we have to go back and get it, because when we got the quotes, they were $16 a bale. Now we're running $21 a bale, so now we have to collect quotes again, and it seems like we have to start all over again to get these. So the first quote, for example, if they got 800 bales, if they requested 800 bales at $16 a bale, now it's at $21 a bale. That 800 comes down drastically. So things are changing a lot quicker. If we do feeds, salt blocks, protein tubs, those prices don't change as much. So that's kind of like a better way of taking care of things when you're talking about supplemental livestock. So we're kind of leaning that way. The other problem I come across, which is a big concern to me, is chapters requesting copying grazing permits and tally sheets. A lot of these are covered by the Privacy Act, and there's a lot of sensitive information in here, and I'll bring that up quickly. At one time, we were wondering why one of the chapter officials had so much information about their neighbor. And what we found out was the grazing official was collecting grazing permits, making copies, and filing them at the chapter. So when the land dispute came up, the chapter officials probably pulled those documents and started using against the neighbors. So that's my biggest concern, is the violation of Privacy Act. If we're collecting CIBs, another document like that, grazing permits are being copied and filed at the chapter and unsecure. When we filed in the filing cabinets at the BIA, these are locked up, and the only way you can get to it is if you go through the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act Coordinator. They authorize you to get a copy out of there. So unsecure files and sensitive documents is one concern. The other thing is, if we have a lot of the chapters don't have storage space. So when these products are hauled in, there's nowhere to store these supplies. So that's another concern. The other concern is that we're going to clean out the suppliers too at the level. And then the other thing is transportation. A lot of chapters don't have the fund, the means to transport large amounts of these supplies. So we have to look towards the departments or other departments to assist us, and they're not available at this time. So those are some of the things I have, and I want to give other grazing officials a chance to speak on this. Oh, the other thing is the AIF. Yesterday, I got I didn't have a flyer for the garden and farm incentive program. Yesterday at the chapter meeting, I was asked by one of the constituents of when they will be coming around to fill out applications. And I said, I don't have a flyer right now. As soon as I get it, I'll give it to you. Well, I got it at 4:30 yesterday, and I found out that it's going to be set up in Chinle today. So short notice is my concern, and I ask that if we can do extension on farm incentive and garden and farm incentive, both of those application processes. So thank you, Honorable Chair Nez. The brother giving me the floor. I would give the other grazing officials a chance to speak if they're on. Thank you.
Mr. So, for sharing that concern as an elected official, a grazing official at your community, and what you've shared with us. We need to hear these. We need to know how some of these can be corrected, just like the violation of the Privacy Act, where chapters are storing very important, sensitive information on permittees. So, and the tanhishin anigiba kenits and ashin hit ahoda nis era. So, do we have any other grazing officials on the call?
Chairman.
Mr. Chair,
Chair.
this is
one
this
moment.
is Maybelline. This is Maybelline Begay from Forest Lake Chapter.
Are you a grazing official?
Rep.
Okay.
I'm a chapter official, but our grazing rep is conducting another meeting, so I'm going to give an update on her behalf.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So there's some PowerPoints and other documents that were shared by Dr. Yellowhair and Rudy Shabala, and then also Mr. Watchman. I would like to get a request to get a copy of those documents. And as far as the AIF funding that has been given to the chapters, Forest Lake, we are working with the communities to try to make the assistance available to all of the ranchers within our area. And so applications have been submitted. We have a little bit, I think a little bit over 40 now, but there's a concern. Some of the, I would say about a quarter of the ranchers are hesitant to submit their applications, fear of sharing the information that they've that would be highlighted on their application, and then just I guess experience that they've encountered with the hardship, where we're told that the monies are going to go out this day, and a week later it still hasn't gone out, and so forth. And for that reason, there's reluctancy. But we keep reassuring them that their information is confidential, and that we want everybody, all the ranchers, to get assisted within our chapter. And there's a lot of talk about the problems with this project. One of them is the lack of hay. Dr. Shabala reported that there's no more hay at Napi, and then we have to go elsewhere. And so that's an issue. And then there's also a drought situation that was mentioned by Mr. Watchman. And thank you for those information. As far as the drought, we know that's imminent. And so I was wondering if the Navajo Nation can sponsor some sort of incentive to the ranchers to sell some of their stock, but at a better market if they can sell to the Navajo Nation. And in return, the Navajo Nation can sell those to casinos and bashes and others locally. And I think that way the ranchers would get a better investment on their livestock. And so I just wanted to share that. And we will be ordering livestock fee once we get all the applications. And thank you for that assistance for our ranchers. Yeah.
Aro niche hain ki aro land board is the aro not Eastern Land Board or land board members not Senegi. Land board members slash not that then any other grazing official? One more. Any other grazing official or land board on the call? Then, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Identify
Okay.
yourself.
This is Louise Mark from Crystal, District Grazing Committee member.
Okay, Louise, go ahead.
Okay, we have permit holders that we do tallies for annually. And that's mainly our focus and our job. But now with this AIF, we have people that do not have a grazing permit. And it's hard for us to do tally counts for them. It's not in our line of work. So what's been happening with us to try to take care of this, address this, is myself and one farm board member. We go out and do a GPS reading for the location of where they say they have cows or sheep or horses, and get a GPS reading. It's kind of like we're opening up the whole thing to just anyone. And I don't know what the real plan was behind it. It defeats the permit holders. Is about permit beta tani ki 80 and we just have to no choice but to go out and verify it and get a GPS reading. And that's what we are doing. We're allowing the people to just run livestock out there, although we're not supposed to be doing them. And it defeats the purpose of the whole drought issue, rather than trying to get people to reduce come on in. There's many other areas that we could address, but that's the main one that we're having an issue with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mark. Honorable Freeland, you have the floor.
Chairman, good morning, colleagues, staff, and everyone on the call. And thank you to the presenters, Dr. Yeoman and Dr. Shabala, as well as your team and all of our grazing officials in Senegi. our land boards out there. Shay, Chairman, I did ask for the land boards. I thought Mr. Anthony Begay or any of our representatives from District 15, District 19, District 20, or even District 16 might have been on the call. We have 4 districts in Eastern, and I have 3 districts in my 8 chapters, 15, 19, and 20. And just, getting the updates at the chapter meetings, and I'm real thankful for our land boards. I'm real thankful for them conducting the work and understanding the process. And, I really appreciate the land boards putting forth a lot of effort on this whole process as well. They are getting tally counts. They are going out and meeting with people. They are getting this information that's relevant to this legislation together. I know there's a requirement. There are requirements, yes, by the USDA as a funder of this legislation. It would be nice if we could just use it as a way to incentivize, but not to incentivize, but freely. If we could use it freely as we wished. There are strings attached, understandably. There are circumstances that we have to abide by because we don't want to find ourselves getting into any sort of trouble with this funding in the future. And that's very understandable. So definitely appreciate our land boards for complying with that, and our grazing official, Masenigi, complying with that. The tally counts are real important, and the grazing permit is the huge part of this whole process. So I just wanted to thank them as well. Chairman and colleagues, as well as others, it was my understanding, that our ranchers could also, or our grazing and our land boards could also purchase supplements and range cubes. Remember those, especially like mineral blocks as well. Remember the range cubes that we got or we saw up in Wolf Springs? I think they can purchase things like that as well, and purchase items as such. So I just wanted to mention that as well. We shouldn't be looking at incentivizing a need to sell if that's the issue. But a lot of our people are really trying to hold on to a lot of their herds. It's really it comes down to a land management decision on our ranchers and how they want to take care of the land too. And just seeing in areas I when I go to Lake Valley, I look at, there's one area that I look at in particular. I used to see it as really overgrazed. There was no grass, there was no forage. Now when I drove through there not too long ago, I saw the grass come back. There's grass now. There's forage now, and it's times like that we've got to look at how do we start looking at range management. How do we start looking at imposing range management, and just kind of practice the whole concept of what we saw at Wolf Springs, how Sam and how the ranch enterprise, how they went from 900 head of bison to 300 head, and then they rotate the herd just to help the land heal, give the land some time. And I thought that was really something that they saw. Talk about range management in action, and that was a good example. That's why I bring it up. And just to kind of think of that and how that whole process was working. I did take my chapters up there, and I did ask them to get that whole concept down and think about that concept of range management. How can we incorporate that and implore that on our areas as well? So the drought is still there. Thank goodness for the moisture. Any moisture that we get, we're so thankful for. But I just wanted to mention that, Chairman, understandably that our land boards have really taken upon themselves to put out information to our areas. And, the requirements, of course, are there. The tally count, CIB, and grazing permit. Those are the basic 3 that our land boards are asking for. So just want to say that. And always appreciate my little brother, and his efforts too, and thankful for him bringing up this legislation as well. We're so thankful for the legislation that he dropped. So Edia, Chairman and colleagues, those are my comments at this time. And Edia, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Freeland, for your statement here. I believe that we do have some concerns that need to be resolved within our own nation. Although I would like to turn the floor back over to Dr. Yellowman. You have heard, as well as Dr. Shabala and Mr. Watchman, the concerns that were expressed by grazing officials as well. If you would respond to those concerns, would appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair. For the comments and the concerns from grazing officials, chapter officials. I think some of the concerns as far as the resources are case by case. A lot of the chapters did receive heavy equipment, trucks, and to the exception of some chapters, maybe awaiting trailers. So those are some concerns or issues that we're still working on. But for the most part, those items were based on the chapter's need. A lot of chapters also share regional, share their resources or their trucks for regional purposes. So that's up to the chapter to coordinate those efforts. So we'll work with the chapters on that. The other is the chapters communicate through ASC and SPPS, but they also communicate sometimes through their delegates to OOC on payments. I don't think that it's enough to not inquire, but simply, I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough for a chapter not to participate in the program or to hold off. I feel that the controller's office under Ms. Begay, Controller Begay, they've been very responsive and addressing some of the concerns at the chapter level. Certainly, we try to do our part in communicating or being a line of communication to the chapters and OOC. So I do know that they were perhaps invited to this call, and if there's somebody from OOC that can respond to that, I do know that OOC has been very responsive to DCD and I guess our needs and or our needs representing the chapter. So OOC can maybe talk a little bit more about how they're trying to expedite some of these payments. But we also, I think, here in Windrock have been, I think OOC's been trying to deal with the hardships, and so they can speak a little bit more to that. I did send Majoline the presentation. I heard her concerns and the other officials as well. So Chair, I'll add to that. I know there's additional conversations about what can be approved upon if there's an extension or another appropriation. And certainly these are items or areas that can be addressed for the next round of consideration. So we're taking notes and we'll incorporate what we've learned here and appreciate DNR being responsive as well. Yeah, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Yellman. Dr. Shabala or Mr. Watchman?
Yate, Shanandai, Chairman Ricky Nance, Shidishna, Rudy Shabala, Shikadoshi, Leo Watchman, but the dish us a not de kitiki, a house, call Otto, Mark Freeland, a range cube, still not down, feed. I don't the mineral blocks about aggie a dot the AIF 4 million date and a on what a for dance now she be down a cut out of a yata for the other DDE out of height and get a ion nation leco. As got a see by get a because she down she out the hadlong but she that out. It is quite and Mark Freeland the key the shot. I don't the confident that Bebenant I call AD the Bebenant sauce that they sauce minity. A shot egg Hawaiian echo deed the Niliash on there now in our sauce. Bebenant sauce each about it. I don't the Chanel. Roland so yeah hard see I thought the Bebenant sauce the Quishi. A chin the car dust. I call Ishi Hanet. I thought the Bebenant saucy. Because I would recommend that this AIF funding covers livestock permittees. It also covers livestock permittees that are in, I don't want to repeat what was said, but that has only the Bebenant sauce the Hadlonegi. I don't the Bebenant sauce by that the Nibili the Hadloni. I can't not logic that you're listening. A art for this $4 million because of course Dalia had maybe 6 to 8 children are under one permit. Some of these can go. I believe some of these children that are up to 6 to 8 in number under one permit can apply under the 3 different possible ways to apply it, and I'll be able to receive feed. The most important thing is we're getting feed out to the Navajo people, and there is a drought, and this feed $4 million to the chapters does directly address drought by keeping by providing funding for feeding our livestock in an enclosed area. I could up on the case of the job that the need of delegate of the Nanette is a deep on date in giving a need the most like that. A console about this dog. I don't get that. See it back at that Major League Brigade, not this kiddie. A Hanet Nas Flushing that dog, and a Leo Watchman, a Eagle Spahas. I call I don't not them kidikito. I call a hat or a hat needing to come majorly. I don't yate. I call Kodoshi, Miss Kokoshin Mantai, Chairman Ricky Nez, a Leo Watchman, a Sonata. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shabala. Mr. Watchman, could you respond to the incentives to have permittees to sell their livestock, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, be as brief as possible. To answer the question, there was a variety of questions that were asked. I think they were somewhat answered through not only the grazing officials responding to some of the earlier questions regarding grazing permits. Moving forward to incentive, there are currently, I guess the $4 million itself was to get out to chapters and with as many members it has, permit holder or not. I think we've gone over that, some of the issues that provide it, but locally, it really comes down to the plan, the chapter plan, and that's the middle, and what the officials, grazing official or the chapter representatives concluded and submitted and approved. I know it's there's some problems have arise and it's been brought up, but moving forward in terms of any kind of drought mediation, we were trying to move forward on the whole AIF package is a drought mitigation fund source, and the Navajo Nation has allocated $17 million and $19 million in form of trying to mitigate the expected, trying to do things about water sources, including there was incentivizing our producers out there. There is some confusion regarding the $4 million and that purpose, and also an ongoing program that's been in existence for 3 years now, which is the farm and garden incentive, as well as the rancher producer incentive, so the livestock incentive program we have. Moving outside of that is the tiers we have in terms of application. It's ongoing. There's a deadline that has passed with our livestock. There was basically it's trying to provide a stewardship program, and as ranchers do know, there are various programs that USDA has out at the local level and by counties, stating that there's been participants over the years, and they've basically have dialed in to try to help basically Navajo producers and in the counties in which Navajo reside. So those are, the offices are probably border towns, but there is recipients that have over the years have been receiving funds to mitigate, but the issue between that and the AIF fund is that most of those programs are loss. You have to have some form of a loss or a tally. So it is consistent when we look at Navajo. A tally, basically someone has to prove they have livestock before they receive any kind of fund. For the mitigation is our Navajo producer to look at what are they doing individually for the drought. Are they keeping within their numbers or that they've been allocated, or are they going below it in terms of what's expected? So long answer to the question regarding what kind of programs. There's currently a program that we have that is we take an applicant, and the applications have for this time of the year, the spring. We also have a fall incentive. The spring incentive is basically trying to get people to comply with their permit, and that's the overall basically purpose. And we want to pay them to invest in their ranch or invest in their livestock, or whether it's medication or supplemental feed, or as we're talking about, some of the hay woes. But the overall objective is to have them make the decision. And it goes back to what Delegate Stewart was saying. This $4 million went to the chapter, and the chapter is looking at the procurement and how to provide, some kind of assistance to the individual, the producer. The other AIF fund that we have is individually working with individuals per chapter. The thought is we would avoid some of the concerns we have with or unexpected expenses. And this is learned by the USDA. The USDA had federal programs years ago that looked at distributions, And that, the conclusion was that they needed to work with the individual. So for this AIF, our thought was the individual, not really the chapter. But however, when this legislation was passed, it what really not say hurt things, but I think it was good for a project as the alternative is the 50-50 formula kind of place a lot of strings on how and immediately we could move these funds as has been reported several times. However, in the future, our intent with the agriculture present the avenue of individual incentive, and if we were looking at also individual incentive with livestock sale, that's a measure in which I believe RDC was presented back, and I look at my notes here, February 24th, 2021, we offered an amendment to this $4 million that included some water payments, as well as incentive sale, as well as distribution assistance, basically paying our officials to be out in the front line. But that was not accepted. So if we move forward, that maybe be looked at and maybe refined and proposed back to the RDC. Is what I'm hearing, a lot of the questions and the pitfalls we're having in relation to individual and them making the decision versus the chapter having a lot of problems with the purchasing and the lack of supply, and then having undue expenses that they didn't think of or wasn't a part of the legislation. So as to answer the question regarding overall, it had been proposed, but it wasn't funded. As we move forward and listening to the concerns, if there is another proposal that moves forward, and that's our intent, mitigating on the front end, like within the next month, presenting something forward that looks at targeting the producers, as well as the coming years. The AIF fund is a part of an insurance policy that comes in annually. And the next report will show the amount of money that's in surplus, as well as the current amounts that we have received on an annual basis in the current year. And even as we speak right now, the first interval of part of our policy and how that is doing. So it all kind of bundles up together on moving forward and trying to mitigate. And there is our concerns moving forward on the expediting these monies. So it's just $4 million, and it is even though it's been a year, 70% of the chapters have received monies and have gotten out, and the other 30 plus, hopefully they will get over the whatever challenge they have and provide that incentive to the individual, or however they stockpile their supplies. Overall, I guess the questions that constantly come up in reference of how it's distribution, how it's working per community. I think some of these are all discussed early on, and how do you move forward, and this is the result. And I think it can be refined, and I think the databases that community development has been able to construct is very valuable, as well as the other unaddressed needs that go along with what was not cited in the legislation or the resolution. So, Mr. Chair, I guess the Department of Ag, in terms of wanting to present, and I think the Office of Controller will place a number of what's available, and we have intent to revisit and hopefully look at the other incentive package that was asked to be funded a year ago, along with this $4 million. There's another X number of dollars that we have placed, and as we look at it, I think the mitigation for 2022 is going to take another appropriation, and in how we work that either through the chapter or individual is probably our decision moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Watchman, for that. Honorable Stewart, you have the floor.
Okay, Chairman. I was using my phone for questions and comments, but the other comment that I have, Shana Chairman, Vice Chair, Shana Cap, though in talking with the grazing official here and chapter manager, the question came from Shana, Mr. Roland, so as to multiple names on a grazing permit. What they're doing from here, the chapter, they're only going with the first name on the front of the permit. On the back of the permit, na visit the bakat and the and I did hear that before from District 18. So when I go attend their meetings with District 18, Aro Kodo such another Louise Mark, so yeah, hard CE, a store Kodogi the permits at that then. A bit that hashi that kid no hashi a quende if you follow this policy that DCD has put together go yeah you're in compliance hey shop permits a bit a ajabedate a jashi when not lost one loan the when not so at deno yeah you're on the back of the list. You're on priority 3. Kojogi yeah, they're still in priority 1. The now so the holonegi, na glosh cotton da kai yeah, there's still in priority 1. Sachigi yeah, they can wait. Kojigi is a bit just according to what was already stipulated again from what Mr. Watchman stated. What's already put in this AIF funding and the way it has been established. So for me, there is really no change as to how it's been used. It's still the grazing permittee is still having a first priority. So again, that goes back to me saying they are coming into compliance because then the grazing officials then know so called yeni attend Queen la bling hondo but the beto beka shida hono quit out nas yeah, we have the trainings, we have the seminars that are coming up. Yana de Kaila in Holbrook this week that we have information on for, and then we have another one in June again for livestock, cattle, to help our ranchers, to help our producers through agriculture, like the one we're going to be attending in agriculture in a couple of weeks. But when we bring that back to our chapters, that's how we're going to help them, our local individuals, develop and establish something using these funds. Again, it goes back down to us helping our chapters become more locally sufficient to where they can then be their own producers and be their own through agriculture or through livestock, whichever way it's going to work. Also, with the limited guidance, which is what we're trying to get at in the future from Department of Agriculture. That's what I want to share thus far. Again, Shania Chairman, there's those comments from the grazing official from here and the chapter from here that, there's just those, but they are dealing with those on individual basis, but there's really no hardships coming in as difficulties coming in, rather, not hardships, but difficulties coming in with that. Shania Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Stewart. Let me go to Honorable Vice Chair Walker. You have the floor.
Chairman, thank you for the time here. About the chapter records, including tally counts and grazing permit data. Records, as well as chapter official records. But there is a wide range of records that we know that are kept at the chapter offices across Navajo Nation, 110 chapters. I wanted to mention and make note that there is problems, if you will, associated with records, management records, managing or the securing of records. So with grazing officials, what during their elected offices, their elected positions, and what they acquire, obtain, collect through their tenure as an elected official. It was mentioned earlier by one of our grazing officials that is private, that is confidential. So we all kind of agree. So the grazing official that collects those kinds of documents during their term as a grazing officer or official, when they stop being that official, what do they do with that record? Then they become private citizens, and they still are in possession of those records that are confidential and private. There's no control of Quagga. They're not required to return that back to the office or to even to the next grazing officer. Then the tools and equipment. Ada, I noticed that we're hearing reports that new incoming grazing officials do not get that. That's not transferred to them. So back to records. Chapter officials, I would even think it extends to council delegates. But when we're talking about sensitive, confidential documents, historical documents, that should be kept at chapter houses, offices. And so the wants to make comment on that, kind of look at that closely. So I know one of our colleagues recently emailed us, Delegate Daniel So as on Ishbaholo. Jodai Ban Sikis, but then no Joko Ibez on the Dashin Kabadi. That's what can come out of this work session, Chairman, though, committee members. Secondly, the rancher producer incentive. This is not the first time this is mentioned or discussed. With Department of Agriculture, we did have a conversation, Delegate Stewart and myself, on this. Livestock sales incentives. Although in my conversations with various people from the Division of Natural Resources, similar conversations. I think it's time to get that on paper, although to see if we can get legislation for it. The source of funding could be AIF or the UUFB. The UUFB, if it's emergency related, certainly by all means, that's the source of money we look to as leadership. We need figures, we need some data, of course, to justify that. So that could be the takeaway from today's meeting. Although I'm glad the division directors are on the call. But I said that decision and chair, though, committee members and presenters and everyone on this call appreciate the discussion we're having here very important, and there are a lot of takeaways from this as policymakers. But as elected officials that are also on the call, Chairman, back to you.
Thank you, Honorable Vice Chair Walker, for that concern. I remember when I was a chapter official, the FMS stated for chapter officials only that when they finish their tenure as an official, they return all necessary important documents such as the FMS and other important information that was issued to them. And I don't know what policy there is for grazing officials in reference to that, but I know that Mr. Watchman works closely with the grazing officials, and perhaps Mr. Watchman, you can respond to that and let us know what grazing officials do with these important information at the end of their tenure. Mr. Watchman?
Mr. Chairman, right now, when someone on the transition, they're supposed to return, property and any, relevant documents, as mentioned. A lot of documents consist of ongoing cases or a request for transfer, and those type of documents are supposed to be handed over to the new incoming elected official. But I can say that does not happen consistently. I mean, and maybe there needs to be strengthening of that transition that we procure and protect that as it moves forward. But in terms of their responsibility is to give all property back and also information. And say if someone is in a contested race at the local level, 9 times in 10 that doesn't happen, and we struggle to get property back. We struggle to get information on what meetings had taken place to move forward on, say, a dispute in any given community. So it's inconsistent, Mr. Chair. And but one of the points that was brought up early on is that regarding the information that's required for the funding. We interpret that the grazing official will only verify, and I guess to Mr. So's concern, and he brought that up with myself, and I indicated the grazing official is just to verify. It's not to make copies, and for it to be copied again and used for other purposes. It's supposed to the engaged official. Each chapter is supposed to just basically said they are in compliant or they verify. However, there are some officials that are not really working consistently with their chapter and those chapter officials. So there's where the problem kind of enhances itself, where the producer is looking to the official, and then the official is then gaining those documents. I'm not sure how they're, I guess by receiving the copy of, say, a grazing permit is the verification, but the grazing official is supposed to be sitting there hand in hand or working closely, but that's not happening in every community. But again, moving forward, this is the first time we're involving 2 divisions to distribute a fund. And as we move forward, I think indicating there's some safeguards that put in place by community development, which is very valuable. As we move forward, how can it not be so bureaucratic? And that's the challenge that we have as the part of agriculture, division of natural resources, as well as community development. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Watchman, for that. Honorable members of RDC, I would like to give some time to Eastern member and have her provide us a statement. Ms. Eda Arvizo, you have the floor. Press star 6 to unmute. Ms. Etta Arviso?
Yat Bene, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yat Ishanand, I know any call Resource and Development Committee, Benjit Ochihigi, Mr. Chair, Do, Vice Chair Thomas Walker, and then also Mr. Daniel Freeland, and also Kialan Bigay, Wilson Stewart, Yat Ishanand, I know any Do, presenters no sini presentation a yabanake with Dr. Pearl Yellowman, Division Director, Community Development Ado, Dr. Rudy Shabala, Division Director, Natural Resource, Leo Watchman Jr. Nido, Anoslo, Shachin no sini do kahibig ago. Eastern Agency, Eastern Navajo, as a tribal member of Navajo Nation of Indians Treaty of 1868. That's who I am, the Nethato. Although, Hashin Soko, Shanant Ano Siniki, Nakaban Sitaki, Stoki, Nare website that will look a computer bit Inish. Ado she go beta hos answer. Ado had it out the website but kaida maybe has ani do in the art general bakatsenelo. Ahot on jondo le ado hashin soko kon windmill the so the holland kad johana solar panels da chata Egit all the Shinsto, Ahadit all the Navajo Technical College, Jo Ultrain, Harshin and Zini, Egi Bide Diska, Be a call Dahut all the Shida, the Snahas all that, Dalia, Livestock and Lenny Gito, a call Jondo Les overgrazing the no Obayati. Ako that ehida a joat has ani the website the bakao shin jonedo continue doing workshops in communities do hashin soko do has ani hullo jo BIA federal government basta English do anan let is indo do atel ida do jo has ani is do the hullo. The community members and it Lenisa Takata Ilzido Ado that the Nilsen she in Lenin later Hichona Denla our grandparents, ancestors, that was the only economic they already had. A call could they when that the that they need to young them le Ado what a hit out is not unnatural. So other Shanant Ano Sini oath of office or Sado elected land board, other farm board. What grazing official that I'll yell jo what Sado the community stage nesto the trans ni Hashin Sogo Ale not set that year land the Kashin like right now it's just over the phone or through the computers. So although I like to see all the phone numbers that can work through the these departments. If in case there's a question, that's why place it on a website, and so that way there can be a better communication. It's just not unnecessary. What in general the electronic actually behind although your English can be misunderstood, which is kind of hello. But other neck actually go a bunch of carto, it's just not understood. What
So I say it's important to know our language. There's no misunderstanding in English. I want to encourage to better put things on website. And we're in the year of 2022. And I look at the state's website and the livestock and whatnot, and they have a lot of information and laws in there. So we need to do the same thing and better things for our younger generation and our children and grandkids. So all those that don't know, these livestock are very sacred. So the bedon hijianet call what are this. So ado she not kin son lenny she so what are being just left. So showing action and I, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Viso. Roba Henchiki do data Vision of Natural Resources Baon Nishtobi Yagoda Anishiki Department of Agriculture. Department of Agriculture, a land board do grazing official do farm board is not nish. Ajbe on nation linegishin hit all that in the Mr. Watchman, if you would provide as much information as you can and disclose that to the public on the website when laws or certain things are needed in reference to the work that you all do. I don't do that. And then grazing official, the farm board, land board, chapter officials, Bishbahas, and the president. Ado hat Ada von Ahocha Gishin Hashin Bespahosensla. A Kobeshbahas and Nate Linike on 110 chapters because it in the that the Bishbahas Anik Des Engisa. Pay the area gonna have chapters gonna. Order. Ayo Kata Hodet Laile Quagi. Even Yepish was an Corona chapter Siki Hans Chabashinat Apis Nahilna. So what are ancient on the Shadel Edabadi, no chapter meeting the bit reporting daily. So by law, there's these meetings any bit lastly. Bishmas anye lastly a koe AD enego ha the CJA-01-22. We have to provide a teleconference number for the people to participate in the kit in the banaho edo tagotai hybrid meeting beti nene de shato hit CDC guidelines. It's Ninigibik Echo ARJ Tra Sutashin Shinido Shizeblia as Baldo Hastades is on a high trago Ada Sato Trada Lebenched either wins and go Quaba has a cohort on him on the Shadale Edo Abonet Zanigit Ego hot on him on the Shadale Eat a Sata a co art and a Sata Iship. At a sheet that about and we do what we can to provide information that a head need to hand Ziggy Aro, Miss Arviso. Shanant, I know Senegi Kodo. We're on A under presentation and discussions. So we can go to B, Kodo Controller's Office, Napahido Asto, OMB, Napahido As. What end it last night? Nidos Kidishta.
Chairman Rudy Shabala.
Dr. Shabala.
Thank you, Shanat Anishan, and Rikines Ado Sohat Sosi Go Yat Eta Arvisa Janago Sadi Nin Makoho Anni Nanhite Kit Sitchin that Major Link call o open ocean the webinar sauce in PL Hayit the 1974 that it's cancel Dalia call the AIF $4 million 110 chapters because they the webinar sauce that they lehki the webinar sauce it's not that the has on the around the webinar sauce that then epic ST Shannon delegate Wilson Stewart AAD start has honestly called the Ani Ashi and need support. Ayana named the Tahna the Kido the Eternat in you see Shabain Lito so Shannon and Seneki the Bella as me or basically what I the never caught it I don't the I don't hockey don't nan ayabahanat this she Kisbeda husband Leo she we might have phone numbers of vendors on the he has a set price maybe some cases up with trucks at it of that they touch it but you did some asati bahadoniki of Nagisne and he probably ups the price a little for his transportation costs and for his own groceries. The nebetata at the nebana nisa she ain't unhinged the net. She thought you cut a nane she bizarre in the is lata a call cut Vinasha $21 a bale, booze kiss at $22 a bale. A call about the honey at the chapter level. At the lake, Nakina hide out here his sheet. Out in the yado, Buckeye the honey. I looked it up and out in the yet on the honey say. I'm thinking I'm going to get cheaper hay because I'm going directly to the source, but it was also a retailer and a wholesaler. I didn't go to the farm. It was the same price as here on the rest. I think that guy, I know he pays $20 a bale or $16 a bale a Navajo country. So he gave me the same price as what would cost up here at the rest. $16 a bale, or whatever the price was at that time. She you know. So what the whole what she didn't call Bahalit up at the needle than she didn't. I don't know that we can do anything legislatively, but if we're sharp on our prices at the producer level, the vendor level, we can based on the chapters, and they're going to be contacting vendors. The chapter based on $20 a bale, then you don't net the vendor price could. Based on the but not after a hat shall not aniki a
Yeah, Dr. Shabala, Aro, not behind Jiki. Honorable Eugene so.
I on his start on Sunday. You're talking right in my background. I consider myself as a environmentalist, and natural resource is my backyard. in that sense, we are based on that energy. Asian has on the drought of need. A drought of Yago, a generated hard last drought. I even not drought, we based on it earlier. On a training just a go a hard little hail, the Kaya, the crack on the husband. Oh, I thought just that. But not this kid, I should go, not to you guys. But honest, the base. Where is the drought and whose area is where the drought is and when did it start and Zago. As I've been a grazing official for so many years, always with the soil water conservation district as well. Way down, the most bad thing that we always came across was the matching funds with the soil water conservation district. Because it's ended down there for quite a while. So we match with the state natural resource conservation service pilot projects here. So the matching funds for those that they can't another one has in the house use. The government no horse. So we die individual farmer, individual ranchers. But I guess now this there. We used to have a deferred grazing that I have no, but one of the programs. So when you defer the grazing, it usually is only good with the RMU area. And that's key. So how many acres, how many dollars a day in that used to be. Or you love it, sometimes more than the calves they sell during the fall time. Is loud on part of this plot. But AD, based on deep on this case. But you drought to be a like it don't eat. Because the deferred grazing to go be a later case the card on the card. RJ name install essential key you have caught another one. RJ they build earthen dams that water studies that the windmill out on the trough and that's the pipe and the trough every fence area is on us town that is that that check hard and does no water catchment that is that a coin baby and the show could the third grading demand and they are should they see need. Because the Kong of special honey to what I know had it by the Chinese is not but our Kayaki is Kayhoto, Miss Kayaki and harder. They Babylon, I don't hold me muscle. They have more authority and Dr. Shabala right there. We law born me muscle with a 25 CFR 167. And the 3 Navajo Nation Code 871, which is South Chad. Beyond that, the planet population of car grazing company in the 13 on the ever car, and the 13 says enforcing the Navajo grazing regulation. So if you look at that book, enforcing the grazing regulation, bookie just this is the conserving the land, forest and the water. Because I don't understand it and to build up deteriorated areas. So that's where this money should come in. Based on one day. And also working with the state matching funds. I thought, I didn't own this money. So it would be real nice to use it as also a cost share and also with building up deteriorated areas. Or your grazing committee, but that to fence an area. Quick fence, you don't least go out of it on the card, they have that authority. So the authority was allowed the grazing committee. So even Nashiko Choya job is clear this is compensation. All bound this case. And then on the other side, the record stuff, because only deep beyond the the CFO the Shindy 3 Navajo Nation Code ABA Basila, ARA, all Thai Arab Shahan, the records are all the tales, everything has not. I don't know, it also pretend as long as I able get the pay not an to keep not up in and open not an permit is to add or subtract or get out new permits if they monitor permits, get grazing permits. It can in us cardinal any kahago. Every year nal kahago. It is the bahazon. It is the monitor in to create all the up in the list. So even now height others and now if we can say do something for our younger generation to the seventh generation, we need to start thinking about rebuilding the natural resource across the Navajo Nation and also try to keep the water on the Navajo Nation. And Keisha Taven got another said that the only thing that's wrong with it now with the work with Keisha is because there's a lot of authority, even not started from the grazing committee, out in the land Department of Ag, out in the other departments now within the natural resource division of natural resource, out there is a natural resource director now, other resource development company now, who has the authority to work government to government. So we need to iron that out somehow to take care of all this. Even now, the government has a base of that, and all the other entities up in the base of it. I call a other and see the chart. He paid the panels up in the weekly. Last week up in the weekly in the shoulder. They say about them even now. So the oil based on the year. If it had all on each other, you really have this thing from the yeah, Rick, for allow me this time. Thank you.
Mr. Roland, so are you still on the call with us? Mr. Roland, so are you still on the call? Then yeah, Shananta, any other comments or questions under A, presentation and discussions? Then go in now. Do we have the Office of the Controller on the call? Office of Management and Budget?
Chairman.
Yes.
We have Darlene Sam from Office of Management and Budget, and we have Natasha Damon from Office of the Controller on the call.
Okay. Ms. Damon?
Chairman, there's Mr. Roland, so I'm still on too.
Mr. Roland, so I had a question for you before we go to the controller's report. The grazing permit that Deniki or you then how do you deal with that in your area? Deep grazing permit that Deniki do Kodishakov jet and Ninigi.
Okay, so for example, my chapter, we've got 40,000 for the May Farms chapter. Mr.
So? Mr. So? Guess we lost him there. Ms. Natasha Damon, are you on the call? Natasha Damon.
Hello, I'm on the call.
Okay. Could you provide us a report on the current expenditure listing on the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund? If you read the agenda, it says, is there a policy for expenditure on timelines for project completion? How many projects have been completed? How many are pending? Has the Department of Agriculture submitted an ending report for all projects completed? What are the plans for the 2022 funding for AIF? Ms. Damon?
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. We forwarded a memo that was presented to Budget and Finance last month. February 15th is the date. And on that memo, there's attachments for the financials. I did update the Exhibit C for the chapters as of February 2028, or sorry, February 28, 2022. And excuse me, the current expenditures for the chapter accounts is 2.5 million, with about 1.5 million left from the 4 million allocation that the other presenters have mentioned before. And then as far as the budgets, that would be OMB, if there were any more budgets turned in for the accounts or for the projects. So there's an attachment B for on the memo, and that shows year one totals, and then for year two there's only 3 set up as of January 31st. I believe there are 2 more projects set up in February, and as of today, or as of January 31st, the unreserved balance is approximately $50 million. If Darlene has more to add about the budgets, if there are any more budgets to set up, I'll defer to her.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Darlene Son?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman Nez and members of the RDC committee. This is Darlene Sam from OMB. So what you have on your agenda, the questions that you have, is there a policy for the expenditure of timelines for project completion? And second, how many projects have been completed? Next question, how many are pending? Has the Department of Agriculture submitted an ending report for all projects completed? What are the plans for 2022 funding for AIF? Just to let the committee know, these AIF projects, they were approved by, we all know where the source is. It's the insurance proceeds from CPK, or I don't recall the name of the carrier. So there's a fund management plan that was approved per RDC resolution RDC AU 7418. That would be the policies that would be followed, and pretty much these questions can be answered from there. And then there's another resolution, RDCD 118, which approved the year 1 and 2 AIF projects for 2017 and 2018. That's what we follow for us, Office of the Controller and OMB, what is submitted by DNR, Department of Agriculture. So in the fund management plan, that's the policy. That's where it outlines the policies that Department of Agriculture has to follow. So what it says there in the fund management plan is that the Department of Agriculture will submit budgets. And for year 1, those budgets, there were at least 24 of them that were set up. And those budgets have to go through the internal executive branch executive order review process. Those budgets have to be reviewed. So the year 1 projects, that's the process that it took. And there are 24 projects there. And it's divided between 3 departments: Department of Water Resources, Department of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fish and Wildlife. And so far, the Controller's Office has the official numbers, but as far as OMB, the budgets that were set up for year 1 was $14,430,500, and expenditures was 8.3. This is as of January 27th. Encumbrance of 741,000. So there was a budget balance of 5.3, and it's about close to what the Controller's Office had. So when we set up these budgets, there was one that wasn't submitted, and I think that was under Fish and Wildlife. We received it since then. I believe that, it was not submitted because there was no support from the division director. So that amount for 345,000 went back to RDC, and that budget was given to Natural Heritage Program. So that budget is set up not too long ago. So that's year one projects, and pretty much this was like the year one part. It was new to the program, Department of Agriculture. So what we do is we set these up as projects. We give them business units, and like I said, the year one was set up in July 2019, and they identified the beginning and end dates. I believe that's one of the questions, timelines and so forth. So it's up to the department how they set that timeline. When are they going to be done with these projects? Yeah, it's supposed to be more than 12 months if they are projects. But so far, to date, those ending dates were extended. There were three extensions that's where we're at. Like for the water resources projects, it was extended twice. So the 9 projects for water resources, the end date is 12/31/2024. And then the 10 projects for agriculture, we are on extension number 3. Actually, they just recently extended it just within this month. It had ended on 9/30/2021, but there was a request to extend the project to, I think, another 3 years. And then forestry, it expired 12/31/19. And then fish and wildlife, some of them expired. Fish and wildlife, they have like 9 projects, and 3 of them, or 5 projects, and 3 of them, the timeline went by 9/30/21, and then December 31st, 2021. So when we when we set up the budgets and sent the transmittal memo, we provide instructions like if they're going to if they still have funds and the project's not done, the program needs to submit a memo to OMB along with new project schedules extending these projects. So that's what they've been doing, with the exception of forestry and then some of fish and wildlife. So there are still balances in those business units that were set up, the 24 business units that were set up. Like I said, if you add them all together, it's 5.3. So as far as the closeout, there's no closeout yet. There's nothing. That's all on the Department of Agriculture as the lead agent in this AIF projects. That's year one. And then year 2 was approved by RDC, the same resolution that was approved the year 1 projects. But those projects are just now, they went through the executive official review, and I just got them back on Friday, and that's what I'm setting up. So their year 2 projects, there's 22. Some of them are continuation of year 1, but we're assigning new business units to them. That's what Natasha is seeing on the FMIS. I'm setting them up as we're meeting here. So that's year 2, and so I think I answered all the questions. Is there a policy on the timeline? Yes, but it's identified. It's actually written in the BIM that projects will be set up. That's where the policy is, and it's incumbent upon the program to identify the timeline. And then how many projects have been completed. We have not gotten the closeout report, so that will be a question to Department of Ag. How many are pending? Those are the year 2 budgets that are pending. Plus, I just gave out to you the year 1 that there's still $5.5 million that are still sitting there. And then has agriculture submitted an ending report for all projects? No, because they're still ongoing. What are the plans for 2022 funding for AIF? That I would have to defer to Mr. Willie with Office of the Controller, and then Ferdinand Nota I have no knowledge of that. So all OMB is all we have authority over is whatever numbers we get from the controller's office, and then that's when we ask for budgets and we follow the fund management plan and have the Department of Agriculture submit budgets through the EOR process, and then the projects are set up. That is OMB's report, Chairman is, and members of the RDC committee.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sam. Appreciate your presentation. Honorable members of RDC, do you have any comments or questions? We also have on the call with us Shemayaja Honorable Amber Kennesbaugh Crotty. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yat ACS Chairman Nez, Resource and Development Committee members. Yat thank you, Chair. Here Ani Nesle do Delagana Bashichin, Destiny Deshache do Delagana Deshanella. Shay Amber Kennesbaugh Crotty, and it's Tohatsoy de Naksha. I represent Sheep Springs, Sugar Hill, Paulina, Sanasi, Red Valley, Cove, Gadiai, Beklabato on the council. But as all of Navajo leadership, we represent all of our beautiful people. I appreciate the conversation. And Chairman, in terms of this portion, if there's no questions from the committee members, being on budget and finance and representing Northern Agency, I'd like to ask Saddam and Sam if there's any recommendations that OMB has in terms of clarifying the process to expedite the funding, or is this or is there a need at capacity with the project working with OOC to help with these budget unit numbers? My concern is if they move forward or ask for an extension, what is the time frame in terms of how long the program has to wait for the extension or the number to be reassigned? And then in your experience, what do you think is the best process if the council should or the oversight should consider project timelines, now seeing that there's millions of dollars that are not being expended, but yet are hearing from the community members they desperately need that help. Thank you, Chair and committee members.
Thank you, Honorable Crotty. Ms. Sam? Ms. Darlene Sam?
Okay, Chairman Nez and members of the committee, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. In response to Delegate Crotty's question, as far as OMB's recommendation, I would probably have to meet with Department of Agriculture to work those recommendations out. But as far as OMB is concerned, when we do our transmittals for any projects, that's what we recommend, like these timeline extensions, or when Department of Agriculture requests an extension of these projects. I know that we've been making that recommendation, give us a realistic date. So our recommendations are there to do it longer, give us a realistic date, because 12 months, we just continue, it doesn't happen. So we continue to extend these projects. So I would probably need to meet with agriculture again to see what they can recommend for any other projects. That would be my response, Chairman Nez.
Honorable members of RDC, do you have any other comments or questions?
Chair, I have a comment.
Okay, Honorable Stewart, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Shania, Chair. Ms. Sam, my question would be for OMB, maybe OOC, but we're doing year one, and we did year one, like you stated. They moved into year two, which you just now are working on or establishing, inputting into the system. So my question would be, with year one and two, and this is where I would like clarification on that part. With when I did the 4 million, there was the question on what year we would be using, either the Navajo physical year, or are we using the agricultural year that it was given back to the nation? Can you, or do you know that clarity on that one? I think my question might be confusing, but I'm trying to figure out how else to word it to you.
Honorable Stewart.
That was my question, Chairman.
Okay, Hakushila, thank you. Ms. Sam, your response? Ms. Sam?
Chairman Nez and members of the RDC committee, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble unmuting. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, if I understand Delegate Stewart's question correctly, he's asking for year one, what crop year does that cover, right? Is that the question?
Honorable Stewart?
Yes, Ms. Sam, exactly, the crop year.
The crop
Go
year.
ahead.
Okay, Chairman Nez and members of the committee, response to Delegate Stewart's question. The best individual that would answer this question and the way he explains it to me, Ferdinand Nota with Department of Agriculture, would be the best person to answer the question. But just the way I understand how he explains it to me, year one is for crop year 2017, and for the in accounts, the project accounts, we go by Navajo Nation fiscal years when we set up the budgets. But according to Mr. Ferdinand Nota, the crop years are by calendar years. That's how he explains it to me. So year one was 2017 crop year. Year two is crop year 2018, and so forth. And that would be my response, Chairman Nez.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sam. Mr. Ferdinand Nota, are you on the call?
Yes, Chair. Good morning. This is Ferdinand Nota.
Good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning. Yes, Chair. The way we summarize our project accounts is basically by the crop year that the funds were received in. For example, the year one funds were the net indemnities that came in for that crop year. As a result, the RDC allocated $17 million for the crop year in the budget. And then for crop year two, which is 2018 net indemnities from the insurance, those were budgeted as crop year two funding that were allocated by the RDC for $19 million approximately. Okay. So, and the budgets that Sam referred to were all allocated through OMB on year one. We went through the executive official review process to get those allocated and for business unit numbers to be allocated. for the year 2 projects, the budgets, we had to make many revisions on the final end dates, and those were resubmitted to OMB. They went to Controller's Office. They went through review, I believe, by Department of Justice, and they are back at OMB. And right now we're waiting on the assignment of the new business unit numbers for the year 2 projects. So I hope, and basically internally, we are accounting for the funds by crop year. Now, the other point to make here is that Ms. Sam mentioned the fund management plan as well as the underlying council resolution CO 5716. And basically within those legislations, there is a clear distinction about these funds, being that they are insurance related, that these funds are based on crop year funding, and that the funds do not lapse by fiscal year ending dates or by calendar year ending dates. So, and basically these funds are allowed to be carried over regardless of the fiscal year end or the calendar year funding date. And for that reason, that's why some of these project extensions are going beyond the end of the fiscal year or the end of the calendar year. Okay, I hope I answered that question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nota. Honorable Stewart, do you have a follow-up question?
Chairman, yeah. My follow-up question then would be Shana, Mr. Nota. So 2017, 2018, so 2019, that would be the crop year for year 3. And we haven't done anything with that one yet, correct?
Mr. Nota?
Yes, Mr. Stewart, my brother, yes, those have not been expended, but they've been allocated by budgets and they've been approved by RDC. Okay, and those have been more or less allocated out by department, including Department of Agriculture, Department of Water Resources, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Forestry, as well as I think there's some in there for the historic preservation also.
Thank you, Mr. Nota. Honorable Stewart.
Chairman, so with that right there, and then I'm going back to the first part of our presentation today, where there was a comment to do an amendment to the legislation. These crop years that we're still working with. What other projects or what other initiatives can we work with the chapters and with the grazing with Department of Agriculture, so to get these funds back down or expended as soon as possible? Because we hear concerns from water wells, water tanks, water troughs, incentive programs for farmers or livestock owners. Okay, how can we put all those to where we have it set out to where we can expend it and we won't have to go back to wait for certain legislations, if possible, to go through, kind of like doing what was mentioned earlier, just a carryover within the department? Is that doable?
Mr. Chair, if I may answer that question or concern.
Yes, Mr. Nota.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Stewart, first of all, keep in mind that the livestock distribution, feed distribution program was allocated by RDC from the crop year 2021. funding. Okay, and as I stated, those funds will not lapse when the fiscal year ends or the calendar year ends. Internally, during the meetings between the Division of Natural Resources and the Division of Community Development, we more or less set up an internal goal to try to expend these funds of the $4 million to try to get those expended by the end of June. Okay. Now, internally, we can extend that with no issue at all because I believe the funding, the budgets that OMB has extended well beyond that. I believe it's through the end of the fiscal calendar year of this year. So there's ample room there for us to expend those funds until we fully deplete the $4 million allocation that was approved by RDC. So, but internally, we sort of like set up a guideline to try to expend these funds by the end of June. And I hope that we are on track to do that through the community development staff and their accounting system and so forth. And so once the funds get to the chapter, then the chapters can work to begin to procure those items through the system and purchase the items and then expend the funds at the same time to deplete the funding allocation that they received. Okay, so there should not be an issue of expending the livestock feed distribution funds of the $4 million. We believe that once the funds get out to the chapter, those funds will be expended fairly quickly. So, but the internal goal is to try to expend those funds no later than the end of June. But if we need to extend that, there's no problem. We can do that without too much problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you. Honorable Stewart.
Agustin Shana, Chairman. Ako Nana Shana, Mr. Nota, and Ms. Sam. So these accounts that were being or are now being inputted with the funds and whatnot, does that include those ranchers that have filed through the incentive program and need to be paid out? Because we're getting questions from those ranchers as to when they will receive their incentives or their payments. And then that's it, Chairman.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Stewart, if I may address your question, keep in mind, Mr. Stewart and RDC and listening officials, the livestock feed distribution was a single purpose type of funding that was approved by the RDC. The incentive payments that were discussed by the RDC this morning, we have separate accounts for those programs under the Department of Agriculture. The livestock incentives, there was an incentive there to pay people to downsize their herds and take animals to market, because that's a wise thing to do in times of drought. And basically to downsize their herds to lessen the pressure on the vegetation or the range resource. But those are funding that is available through other programs under the Department of Agriculture. The Livestock Feed Distribution Fund program will not be used to pay those incentives. Okay, those will be paid out of other programs and through the budget extensions that we are getting through the Office of Management and Budget. Those will more or less take care of those incentive payments through those other allocated programs. Okay, but the livestock feed distribution will be used only to purchase livestock feed. Okay, and pay for associated costs such as freight to haul hay and so forth. But the other incentive programs, those through the budget extensions, those funding will be available to pay those incentives under Department of Agriculture. I hope I clarified that.
Honorable Stewart, do you have another follow-up?
Not right now, Chairman Shinai.
Honorable members of RDC, do you have any other comments or questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Natasha Damon from the Controller's Office, as well as OMB, Ms. Darlene Sam. I believe we're on number 4 of the agenda, questions, recommendations, and follow-up. At the beginning of our meeting, it was indicated that there is a recommendation to have an extension requested. And I believe, Honorable Stewart, that this is probably within your ballpark there to request that. There was numerous concerns that were brought up today, down to chapter records, sensitive records being kept at the chapter, and it was within the duty of the grazing official and land board to keep those records, and yet chapters have these, and a concern about violation of privacy acts being violated there. So perhaps these issues need to be brought up within the grazing agency meetings and have them make corrections at the local level as well. There is no hay available at NAPI, as stated. So folks are going to have to either wait, and this is why we're asked, a request was made to have an extension. One more time, any other comments or questions, RDC? Then, yeah. We'll go ahead and adjourn. It is now 12:19 p.m.
I'm sorry, Chairman.
Y'all have
this
a good
is
day.
Crotty.
Okay. Honorable Crotty?
Yes, I apologize and I respect that you're adjourning the meeting. But Chair, this is very important and I appreciate RDC. If there's any recommendations, Chair, to either amending the BIM, an idea that I wanted to speak with leadership about is how we can make it easier for our grazing permittees in looking at how we developed the hardship application process and understanding the sensitivity of information. We can ask our staff to look at maybe there's a process where grazing permittees then request as they would either through the hardship or FSA, and so that information stays with with either the land department or Department of Ag, so the chapter doesn't have grazing permits. That has become an issue in my district, but also that also gives us an opportunity to look at the data with the tally counts, and if Mr. Nota's looking at possible recommendations, what areas do we need to concentrate or look at some focus for restoration, and are we using these dollars to maximize USDA grants for conservation? We have been working prior to COVID with the SWCD and the state conservationist, and I know Delegate Eugene So has been very vocal in terms of how we could support that. So Chair, I just wanted to see if there was any recommendations from the committee, but I think working together with budget and finance, we could make those amendments in what we've learned from today's leadership meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Crotty, for that. Ado, your recommendation to amend the BIM, it has been mentioned at Nabikiyetika as well. So it's certainly something that we as leaders need to focus on to assist the local communities and the chapter officials as to how they can work better and request funding in a very easier method than what is written there. So I believe that's something that we need to really consider. And your recommendation is noted. Did you have any other questions, Honorable Crotty, for those that are on the call from the Controller's Office or Budget and Finance, OMB?
Thank you, Chairman Nez. What I'd appreciate is just a summary of from OOC and OMB on either some of the internal recommendations. This is the perfect time to modify the BIM because I believe in July or maybe June, we will accept the BIM for this next coming fiscal year. And if the challenge is crop year versus fiscal year, what would those recommendations be in terms of how, if there needs to be language so that these fundings are not, like, is there a need for a carryover? So I'm not sure. I just need to be sure, and if I could get that in what part of the code or what part of the resolution or fund management plan that these funds are not subject to reversion, and some guidance from the committee on how long you want these projects. Because if it's under resource and development oversight, there could be some possible future stability or to unstable the process if the next committee by council either amends or changes the projects. So how do we keep these projects stable so all of the work that has been completed will progress? And so there may need to be language to protect the current projects and just allow for forward project funding rather than trying to capture or reallocate projects, which sometimes disrupt. And this could be also a good time if the Department of Ag has the capacity, or in this funding, are they going to be developing 5, 10-year, 25-year plans so that leadership, that we could be proactive in terms of not only how we use this funding in the future, but how are we going to address the climate change as was spoken by Ms. Gloria Tom last week, and how that's going to impact our livestock and their access to clean water and their access to forage, and having conversations about that. So thank you, Chairman. That would be my question to OOC or OMB regarding the BIM, understanding the carryover, and what could be recommendations so that these projects then are funded and would not be able just to be reallocated unless there's just cause. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Crotty, and appreciate your participation on the RDC meeting today. Let me go to the Office of the Controller. If you would respond to Honorable Crotty's concerns and also provide your recommendations, Ms. Damon. Ms. Natasha Damon.
Go back and look at that 9 million.
I can read.
Please mute your phones. Thank you. Ms. Natasha Damon from the Controller's Office.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I would agree with Ms. Sam, getting together with Mr. Nota and all of our offices to come up with some recommendations. I believe there were some before, but I would have to go research some of it. What other concerns were there? If I haven't answered all of your concerns, Honorable Crotty.
Honorable Crotty?
Thank you, Chairman. It looks like the entities will need to come together. And so if you could give me some direction, Chairman Nez, when the committee is asking for an update report, then we can anticipate that report and move forward, just with the caveat that if there's any BIM recommendations, they should be submitted soon so that we could work with our legislative council and make those recommendations or have those ready for amendment to the BIM. Thank you, Chairman and committee members.
Thank you very much, Honorable Crotty, for bringing these important issues to committee here. And we will hear from Department of Agriculture, Mr. Nota's office, as well as the Office of the Controller and OMB on their recommendations as to how we could also amend the BIM so local chapters could work with these at the local level, and also to protect the current projects as you stated also, Honorable Crotty. The recommendations that are being made, Mr. Tahi, we probably will have an update report on RDC as to what the recommendations are going to be from OOC, OMB, as well as Mr. Nota from Department of Agriculture. Are there any other comments or questions? Sunandai?
Chairman Nez, this is OMB.
Go ahead, Ms. Sam.
Chairman Nez and members of the committee, just to regarding the question, just to let you know, Mr. Bial is also on the call. Maybe he has some immediate comments he would like to share with the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sam. Mr. Bial, you're more than welcome to share some recommendations with us, sir. Mr. Bial?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. As Delegate Jimmy Yellowhair always says, oh, I'm unmuted, I am muted, and so forth. That was my problem. Members of the RDC and other listeners and Department of Agriculture and so on, I joined your meeting and discussion just towards the tail end there, but I heard that you were all asking for recommendations and suggestions on how to speed up and make it more smooth and expedite the processing of these various documents and so forth. So, as Delegate Crotty mentioned, as well as Chairman Nez, is that we would need a written summary of some of the basic concerns, complaints, and any recommendations that have been made so far. So my office, working with the OOC, Ms. Damon, and Darlene Sam from my office, and Mr. Nota from Agriculture, we can all sit down together and work on a good set of recommendations on how to expedite everything while ensuring at the same time accountability. So as Ms. Damon mentioned, our three offices and maybe even including DOJ, we can all sit down together and do that and be prepared later whenever you meet again on the subject to provide some recommendations, whether that would include amendments to the BIM or the fund management plan or the governing legislation over the entire funding. Delegate Nez, those are my comments at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bial. We would certainly appreciate a sit down with your office, OOC, and Department of Agriculture to come up with recommendations, and perhaps in the near future here, y'all can come back and give us a report on your recommendations. Therefore, we can really consider that and make these amendments to the BIM as well. So I hear Mr. Bial for getting on the call, and yeah, we appreciate your words. So I hear honorable members of RDC, are there any other comments or questions? Chairman, yes, go ahead. Chairman, can you hear me? Yes, Honorable Vice Chair Walker, go ahead.
Oh, other committee members, just a point of clarification back to the chapter record. I just wanted to clarify that my concern is specifically about officials when they leave office, elected office, taking those records. Earlier we were talking about livestock tally counts and grazing permit information. And of course chapter officials so records that are confidential and private, taking them after we leave office, after elected officials leave office. It seems like we have a way to control or discourage use of those records currently, or when officials are in office. But after they leave office, they take those same records that we want secured and protected. There's no protection. While people are still serving in their official capacity, but after they leave office, then that was my point. Not completely, not everything today, but we'll bring that back up at another time. In the meantime, our divisions, Division of Natural Resources, Division of Community Development, Finance Offices, OOC, OMB, supposedly they're taking down concerns and wanted to respond with recommendations and give guidance to leadership as we talk about some of these concerns. Again, take away, what are we taking away from this work session? I'd like to see some of those items addressed. Chair, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Honorable Vice Chair Walker. We certainly appreciate you bringing this back to our attention. It is very concerning, and I think there should be something in place as well. Once elected officials, just like the chapter officials, have to leave all the information. Once they are done with their tenure as elected officials, they're supposed to return all the important information. I believe something like that should be in place as well for grazing and farm board and land board members. What is it that they do with it? You're right about when they have it within their possession, they're protecting it. But once they leave office with it, it's unprotected, but they have it with them somewhere with someone's permit numbers on there, tally count numbers, and other very sensitive information. And that's probably a discussion that we probably need to have with grazing officials also. So, Mr. Tahi, with that, in the near future, when we do have these meetings again with grazing officials, these issues need to be brought up. And we're going to need the assistance of the Department of Justice as well as our legal counsel to provide some guidance as to how we can make corrections to these to make sure that people's private information is not violated. Because that is a concern that was brought up to our attention this morning, that these things are actually happening at the local chapter level. So information like that, I sure wouldn't want my information out there, my private information. So if you have your social security numbers, your driver's license numbers, and other important information, it shouldn't be out there, including our census numbers, if that is available to people. But if I were a grazing permittee, I wouldn't want my permittee number out there floating around somewhere. So that is very concerning. And Vice Chair Walker. So with that, are there any other comments or questions?
Chairman Nez, this is Roland Sook, if I may, really short.
Okay, yeah, I did have a question. I wanted you to respond, so if you could finish responding, go ahead.
Okay, really short on the question that you had. For example, many farms had $40,428. What we did was we offered this to the chapter community, and they voted on it. Non-permittees requested for strictly hay and nothing else, $16,200 for non-permittees. On the other hand, permittees, we allocated $24,229 because the way the grazing officials work, we educate the people on what is the best way to supplement livestock. So we stuck with grain, which is flake corn, for $8,280, mineral blocks, 240 blocks at $2,040, protein tubs, probably the most important thing, 18% protein, 178 tubs at $13,000. So we split it separate. The $24,000 for permittees, I'm in charge of that, working with the permittees and collecting applications. As far as non-permittee hay only, the staff is collecting applications on that side. So that's kind of how we split up the distribution, the funding that we got at our local level. On the other hand, as far as the documents at the local level, a lot of the grazing officials don't carry that sensitive information. When we get a home site lease is the only time we carry that information, but it goes back to the applicant themselves. Tally sheets, sometimes if it's we used to have triplicates, now we have 4. So the 4th one, the grazing official carries it. That's sensitive information that a grazing official would carry. The ones that would carry the most sensitive information is people like the secretary. A district secretary would carry the most amount of sensitive information. So the secretary will have that. The chair doesn't really carry that much sensitive information. We all have brand books. Chile Agency Grazing Committee is going to get brand books this month, and those have sensitive information. Under the Privacy Act, we sign a document saying that we cannot let anybody look at these brand books. And then we also sign a document that says that at the end of our tenure, we return that book to the branch of natural resources, because what's in there is the name, the permit numbers, how their census number sometimes is in there, and how many sheep units they're allowed to carry. This is a very sensitive document. It's a book that has a listing of all the districts in our agency. So we signed a document saying that we will return that particular booklet back to the branch of natural resources. With the Navajo Nation, I believe we don't have anything that reference to Privacy Act. I think we need to bring that up. And when they take their oath, they need to sign these documents, and they need to say that they're going to return these documents too. That's something that we really need to discuss at your level and implement that Privacy Act of Navajo on our own. My concern is when they're stored at the chapter house, anybody can go in there. They're not really locked up. And in this case, a chapter official looked into their neighbors' documents, and this official tried to use it against their neighbors in a land dispute. That's where my concern is right now. But yes, we need to implement a Privacy Act. Thank you.
Important information and how it's handled. We do appreciate that response, and hopefully all of our grazing officials, land board members are following those protocols of protecting people's private information as well. So, Mr. So. And honorable members of RDC, Clash Bahanana, safety there.
Chairman, this is Delegate Claudia.
I believe Honorable Crowdy is going to buy us lunch. So is that what you're going to announce? You have the floor.
I'll buy you lunch from red chili or green. Appreciate it. My last question, Chairman, and I apologize, committee members. We need to have a conversation about the 50-50 formula. If this is going to be an annual distribution. I don't know if the committee was ever provided how many permittees are in each chapter and versus what that looks like with the 50-50 formula. But in my district of 7, we had a huge disparity where we've received a report where one chapter has well over 100 permits, and then surrounding chapters had less than 25. And so there wasn't, what that brings up is now permittees want to change, and I'm not even sure if this is possible. They wanted to change who they're represented under the chapter so they could receive more for next year's allocation. Chairman, I just wanted to raise that to the committee's concern, and I definitely will owe you all lunch. So I hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
Green chili would work for me. We need a conversation on this 50-50 formula because of the disparity between chapters, and also my chapters, only 2 of my chapters have a large number of grazing permittees. My others have more of a farm permittees than they do, but we still have grazing permittees, but it's not at a large number. So when you say that we need to have a conversation, are you talking about the full council or have a discussion between RDC and BFC?
Chairman, at this point, if we could have it between RDC and Budget and Finance as the oversight, and then make our recommendations and how the committee also is going to move forward if this is going to be another resolution is going to be developed. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Honorable Crowdy, Adorshan and Anna Senege, Honorable members of RDC and Mr. Tahi, if we could make a note of that, we could have a joint meeting with the Budget and Finance Committee, not only on this issue, but all the issues that we have discussed with OOC, OMB, and Department of Agriculture. Perhaps at that time we could receive that report from the meeting that will take place and recommended by Mr. Dominic Bial, and therefore perhaps in about a month might work, depending on when they're going to meet and make the recommendations to the BIM to be amended, and we could have this discussion as well at that time. So honorable colleagues, we'll have our advisors, Mr. Tahi and Ms. Peggy Nakai, pretty much coordinate these meetings for us. And then once they find out when they have their meetings between OOC, OMB, and Department of Agriculture, they can let us know and we'll put it on the agenda for approval for a joint meeting. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms.
Mr.
Khan,
Chair?
go ahead.
Yes, as I've been listening to today's conversation, I just wanted to bring to your attention two particular issues, just to bring to your attention and put into the think tank here. And the issue was brought up. The first one I'm thinking about is the issue was brought up about excessive pricing of hay. That the price has gone up, and it seems to be might be exorbitant. And I want to bring to your attention that the Navajo Nation Council passed in the enacted into law a new section of the criminal code with regard to excessive pricing during declared emergencies. And if you will recall, the Commission on Emergency Management declared an emergency with regard to the drought. And so I am about ready to send off an email to members of the Resources and Development Committee and to Dr. Shabala and Dr. Yellerman, the site with regard to the Commission of Emergency Management's resolution declaring the emergency and the 2020 Navajo Nation Council enactment of a new law with regard to excessive pricing during declared emergencies. And my suggestion is that the Department of Natural Resources legal staff were to look at that particular law and to determine whether or not it is applicable with regard to the pricing of hay in this situation. And that's what quickly came to my mind. And so I will send that to you. Members, Chair and members of the Resources and Development Committee, Dr. Shabala and Dr. Yellerman. And the second thing I wanted to bring up is I'm going to email members of the committee, Mr. Chair, and with regard to the fund management plan and the enactment of the agriculture infrastructure fund management plan with regard to time limits on the expenditure of funds. And just to highlight that there is language with regard to the need to expend the funds and essentially no time limit with unless it is determined through resolution essentially by Resources and Development Committee to put in time limits. And so it would appear that the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of the Controllers, their needs to manage the money should be read in conformity with the resolution passed by the Resources and Development Committee, Budget and Finance with regard to that fund management plan. And again, I will send that to the committee and OMB and OOC and Dr. Yellowman, people on this particular call. Mr. Chair, I was just wanting to bring that to your attention and give you the heads up for the email that I am sending the members of the committee and Dr. Shabala and Dr. Yellowman. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Khan, for letting us know that there is a legislation on excessive price gouging on products during COVID-19 emergency, and we would appreciate it if you sending it to us, as well as the fund management plan. And we just want to say thank you. Honorable members of RDC, any other comments, questions?
Chair Henio.
Honorable Chairman Henio, go ahead.
Chairman is 24th Navajo Nation Council's Resource Development Committee
I know that just once real quickly. Like, when I called in this morning, I was at District 16 land board, and at the same time we were listening in on the conversation, at the same time talking about other matters. But one thing that came out was that they want to have a 2-day leadership meeting, and they're planning this out as for April 13 and 14. So ultimately, they want to invite the committee RDC to this leadership meeting to hear their be part of the presentations from various departments regarding land and their duties as land board. So if you could just kind of make that notation on your calendars, April 13th, which is a Wednesday, if you could they're respectfully requesting for your presence by side, verbally let the committee know, but we'll follow this up with a written invitation.
Chairman Henyo, did they say where the venue is going to be at?
Right now, they're looking at Fire Rock, but they still have to get quotations and see if the venue is available. But right now, that's what they are looking at.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Henyo. We'll mark April 13 and 14 on our calendars. Thank you very much. Honorable members of RDC. Thank you for calling in. Appreciate your participation. Also the grazing officials that called in. Thank you from the Office of the Controller, as well as the Office of Management and Budget, ADO Division of Community Development, Dr. Yellowman, Dr. Shabala from Division of Natural Resources, Department of Agriculture, Mr. Watchman, Mr. Nota. Be safe out there. May God bless each and every one of you. We will adjourn at this time, 12:54.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.